Now, you know, one of the most peculiar and yet most inevitable experiences on the path of awakening is the discovery that you are changing in ways that others around you are not. And this creates a very strange predicament. It's rather like what happens when a caterpillar begins to transform into a butterfly while still surrounded by caterpillars who are quite content to remain caterpillars. Now, I want to talk about this because it's something that almost everyone who begins to wake up will encounter. And it can be one of the most isolating, confusing, and yes, dangerous experiences you'll face. Not dangerous in the sense that you'll come to physical harm necessarily, though that has happened throughout history. But dangerous in the sense that you may lose everything that once gave you a sense of belonging, identity, and security. Let me begin by saying that growth is not comfortable. It never has been, and it never will be. When a lobster outgrows its shell, it must shed that shell and expose itself, soft and vulnerable, until a new shell forms. During that time, it is in grave danger. Every predator in the ocean would love to make a meal of a soft-shelled lobster. But if the lobster refuses to shed its shell, if it clings to the safety of what it knows, it cannot grow. It will remain stunted, confined, unable to realize its full potential. Human beings are much the same way. We outgrow our shells, our beliefs, our relationships, our ways of understanding the world. And when we do, we become vulnerable. We lose the protection of the crowd, the comfort of conformity, the security of being like everyone else. And this vulnerability, this exposure, is what I mean by danger. Now, what does it mean to outgrow those around you? It doesn't mean that you've become superior, or that you're better than they are. This is a trap that many people fall into. And it's a sign that they haven't really grown at all. They've simply traded one form of ego inflation for another. No, outgrowing others means that you've begun to see things that they don't see yet, that you've asked questions they haven't asked, that you've stepped out of the agreed-upon framework of reality while they remain comfortably within it. Perhaps you've begun to question the values that everyone takes for granted. The pursuit of wealth, status, security, the accumulation of possessions, the endless distractions and entertainments that fill up our lives. Perhaps you've begun to see that these things don't lead to happiness, that they're empty promises, that they're symptoms of a deeper malaise, a fundamental misunderstanding about what life is and what we are. Or perhaps you've had experiences through meditation, through contemplation, through crisis, through psychedelics, through some spontaneous opening that have shown you that reality is far more mysterious, far more fluid, far more consciousness dependent than the solid, objective, external world that everyone believes in. You've seen through the illusion of the separate self, or at least caught a glimpse behind the curtain, and now you can't unsee it. When this happens, you find yourself in a very odd position. You're living in two worlds simultaneously. There's the conventional world, the world of commerce and politics and daily routine, the world where everyone is playing their roles and taking it all very seriously. And then there's this other dimension, this deeper reality, that's always present but that most people are completely oblivious to. And you must learn to navigate both worlds. You must learn to speak two languages, the language of the marketplace and the language of the mystic. You must learn to be in the world but not of it, as the old saying goes. And this is extraordinarily difficult because the two worlds have different rules, different values, different ways of making sense of experience. The people around you, your family, your friends, your colleagues, they're still operating entirely within the conventional framework. They're concerned with their careers, their mortgages, their social standing, their plans for the future. And these concerns which once seemed so important to you, now seem rather trivial, rather beside the point. Not because you've become callous or indifferent, but because you've seen that there are deeper questions, more fundamental issues at stake. But you can't simply tell them this. You can't sit down with your family at dinner and say, you know, I've realized that the self is an illusion and that we're all manifestations of one universal consciousness. They'll look at you as if you've lost your mind. And in a sense, you've lost the conventional mind, the socially conditioned mind, and you haven't yet fully articulated what you found in its place. So you remain silent, or you speak in hints and suggestions, or you try to find people who understand what you're going through. And this is where the isolation begins. Because the people you've known all your life, the people you love and care about, increasingly seem to be living in a different reality than you are. You're speaking different languages, pursuing different goals, seeing the world through entirely different lenses. And they sense this, even if they can't articulate it. They sense that you're no longer quite one of them, that you've changed in some fundamental way, that you're not playing the game with the same enthusiasm you once had. And this makes them uncomfortable. It threatens them. Because if you can step outside the agreed-upon framework, then maybe the framework isn't as solid as they thought. Maybe their own lives are built on sand. They may respond in various ways. Some will try to pull you back, to normalize you, to get you to be the way you used to be. You've changed, they'll say, and it won't be a compliment. They'll accuse you of becoming strange, impractical, irresponsible, self-absorbed. They'll remind you of your duties, your obligations, your place in the social order. They'll do everything they can to squeeze you back into the box you've outgrown. Others will simply distance themselves from you. They'll find you boring or preachy or incomprehensible. The conversations that once flowed easily now feel forced and superficial. You have less and less in common. The friendship or relationship gradually withers, not through any dramatic break, but through a slow, sad drifting apart. Still others may become hostile. This is particularly true if you've outgrown a religious or ideological framework that they're still invested in. If you were raised in a particular faith and you've moved beyond it, if you've questioned the dogmas and found them wanting, your very existence becomes a threat to those who still believe. You're a heretic, an apostate, a lost soul who must be saved or shunned. This is the danger I'm speaking of. Not that you'll be physically harmed necessarily, though that can happen, but that you'll lose your community, your tribe, your sense of belonging to something larger than yourself. Human beings are social creatures. We need connection. We need to feel that we're part of a group, that we're understood and accepted. And when you outgrow those around you, you risk losing all of that. Now, you might say, well, why not just keep quiet about it? Why not simply maintain the facade, play along, keep your insights to yourself? And many people do exactly this. They live double lives. They maintain the conventional appearance while privately knowing that it's all a game, all a performance. And there's a certain wisdom in this approach. As I said earlier, you don't shake someone awake from a pleasant dream unless the house is on fire. But there are problems with this strategy as well. First, it's exhausting. Living a double life, constantly monitoring what you say, editing your thoughts, pretending to care about things that no longer matter to you, this takes a tremendous toll. You become alienated from yourself, split, fragmented. The very integration and wholeness you've been seeking through your spiritual growth becomes impossible because you're constantly betraying your own truth. Second, it's inauthentic. And authenticity, being true to what you've discovered, is essential to the spiritual path. If you've seen something true, something real, and you hide it, deny it, refuse to live by it, then what was the point of seeing it in the first place? You become like someone who's discovered a treasure but is too afraid to spend it, so they bury it in the ground and continue to live in poverty. Third, and perhaps most importantly, your very presence, even if you say nothing, communicates something. People pick up on energy, on vibration, on the unspoken. If you've genuinely transformed, if you've genuinely outgrown the conventional framework, it will show in 1,000 subtle ways in the quality of your attention, in your responses to crisis and difficulty, in what you laugh at, in what you take seriously, in the way you move through the world. So you're faced with a dilemma. You can't go back, you can't unsee what you've seen, unknow what you've known. But you can't fully go forward either. At least not without consequences, without losses, without a period of profound loneliness and disorientation. This is what the mystics have always called the dark night of the soul. It's the passage between the old life and the new, the death of the caterpillar before the emergence of the butterfly. And it's dark precisely because you've left behind the familiar landmarks, the comfortable certainties, but you haven't yet arrived at the new dispensation. You're in between, in limbo, in the wilderness. During this time, you may feel utterly alone. You may wonder if you've made a terrible mistake, if you've thrown away everything valuable for some nebulous spiritual fantasy. You may long for the days when life was simpler, when you fit in, when you didn't question everything, when you could just go along with the program like everyone else. But here's what you must understand. This loneliness, this sense of isolation, is not a sign that you've gone wrong. It's a sign that you're going right. It's an inevitable stage in the process of transformation. Every hero in every myth must leave the village, must venture into the unknown, must face dragons and demons alone before they can return with the treasure. The treasure, in this case, is your authentic self, your true nature, freed from the conditioning and programming of society. But you cannot claim this treasure while still clinging to the approval and acceptance of those who represent that very conditioning. You must be willing to stand alone, to be misunderstood, to be criticized, to be rejected. Now, I want to be very clear about something. This doesn't mean you should go out of your way to alienate people, or that you should be arrogant or superior, or that you should reject everyone who doesn't share your level of understanding. That would be spiritual egoism, and it's just another trap, another form of separation. What it means is that you accept the consequences of your growth with grace and compassion. You understand that people are where they are, and they're doing the best they can with the level of consciousness they have. You don't judge them or look down on them. You simply recognize that you're on different paths, at least for now. And you trust that if you're meant to have community, if you're meant to have companions on the journey, they will appear. Because here's the wonderful thing. When you outgrow one level, when you shed one shell, you don't remain alone forever. You find others who have also outgrown that level. You discover a new community, a new tribe, a new set of companions who speak your language, who understand your experience, who are wrestling with the same questions you are. This is why spiritual seekers throughout history have formed communities, monasteries, ashrams, mystery schools, philosophical circles. Not because they're elitist or exclusive, but because they needed to be with others who understood what they were experiencing, who could support them through the difficult transitions, who could remind them that they weren't crazy, that the path was real, that the struggle was worthwhile. But these communities are often hidden, or at least not obvious. They don't advertise, they don't proselytize. You find them when you're ready, when your seeking becomes sincere enough, when your loneliness becomes acute enough, and often you find them in unexpected places, a chance conversation with a stranger, a book that falls into your hands at exactly the right moment, a teacher who appears just when you need them. The key is not to cling desperately to the old relationships out of fear of being alone, but also not to cut ties prematurely out of spiritual pride. There's a middle way, as there always is. You maintain what connections you can maintain authentically. You honor your history, your roots, the people who loved you before you changed. But you don't betray yourself to preserve those connections. You don't make yourself small to make others comfortable. And sometimes, miraculously, the people around you grow too. Sometimes your own transformation becomes a catalyst for their awakening. They see something in you, a peace, a clarity, a freedom, and they want it for themselves. They start asking questions. They start opening up. And then the relationship transforms along with you, deepens, becomes more real, more honest, more alive. But you can't force this. You can't make people grow. All you can do is be yourself, be authentic, be the embodiment of what you've discovered, and trust that those who are ready will recognize it. The rest will fall away. and you must let them go with love and gratitude for what they've given you, for the role they played in your journey, even if that role has now ended. The danger of outgrowing everyone around you is real. You may lose friends, family members, communities that once defined you. You may go through periods of profound loneliness. You may question whether it was worth it. But I can tell you, from my own experience and from observing countless others on this path, that on the other side of this danger is a freedom, an authenticity, a depth of being that makes all the losses worthwhile. Because what you gain is yourself, your true self, not the self that was constructed to fit in, to please others, to meet expectations. And once you've found that, once you've tasted that freedom, you realize that you were never really losing anything real. You were only losing illusions, masks, false identities. The real connections, the real love, the real community, these remain, or they appear anew, deeper and truer than before. So if you find yourself outgrowing those around you, know that you're not alone, even in your aloneness. Know that this is part of the process, part of the path. Know that it's temporary, this loneliness, this sense of being between worlds. And know that the courage it takes to keep growing, to keep being true to what you've seen, even when it costs you everything familiar, this courage is the mark of a genuine spiritual warrior, a true seeker of truth. The caterpillar must die for the butterfly to be born. There's no way around it. But what emerges is so much more beautiful, so much more free, so much more alive than what was lost. Trust the process. Trust your growth, and trust that life, in its infinite intelligence, is guiding you exactly where you need to go, even when the path leads through darkness and uncertainty.
It begins quietly, almost imperceptibly, like the faint hum of a melody you have heard before but cannot quite place. One morning you wake and something feels different. The life you have been living suddenly appears unfamiliar, as though you have been following a script written by someone else. You look around and realize that every decision, every belief, every desire that has shaped your days may not have been born from your own depths, but from the silent influences of others. Parents, teachers, friends, society, they all handed you fragments of identity, pieces of what they believed you should be, and over time, you built yourself out of their expectations. And so begins the quiet tragedy of almost every human being. We are taught how to fit in long before we are taught how to be free. We learn the art of pleasing, of performing, of living according to what is rewarded and avoiding what is punished. The strange part is that this happens so subtly that we rarely notice it. We come to believe that the person we have become is the person we truly are. But deep within, a faint whisper continues to call out, reminding us that something essential has been forgotten. When you are young, you are open, spontaneous, unguarded. You laugh for no reason. You cry without shame. You explore without fear. But slowly, you are told which parts of yourself are acceptable and which must be hidden. You are told to stop dreaming so big, to be practical, to stop being so sensitive, to stop asking why. Each correction, each reprimand is like another brick placed upon the wall between you and your true nature. To survive, you learn to hide. To be loved, you learn to pretend. This pretending becomes second nature. You create a version of yourself that feels safe enough to be accepted by others. You wear it like a mask, a face designed for the world. Carl Jung called it the persona. It is useful, even necessary, for navigating society. It allows you to function, to communicate, to belong. But the danger lies in forgetting that it is only a mask. Because when you identify too deeply with the persona, you begin to lose touch with what is real underneath. You start living to maintain the illusion rather than to discover the truth. Yet beneath every mask lies another world, vast and untamed. Jung called this hidden realm the shadow. the part of ourselves we keep locked away. It contains everything we were told not to be, everything we feared would make us unlovable. Our anger, our jealousy, our shame, our secret desires, our fragility. We like to imagine that these things vanish when we repress them, but they do not. They remain alive and active in the dark corners of the psyche, shaping our behavior in ways we do not see. The shadow is not the enemy. It is the part of you that demands to be seen, not judged but understood. Consider how often you find yourself irritated by another person's behavior, angered by their arrogance or selfishness. What if I told you that these reactions often reveal not the flaws of others, but the disowned parts of yourself? Jung said that what we dislike most in others is usually a reflection of what we cannot accept in ourselves. In this way, life becomes a mirror, endlessly showing us the parts of our being that long for reintegration. To find yourself is to face this mirror without flinching. It is to look into the depths of your own contradiction and see not a monster, but a human being. We all contain light and shadow, love and fear, generosity and selfishness. These are not opposites to be defeated, but energies to be harmonized. For if you reject half of yourself, how can you ever be whole? The journey of awakening does not begin by becoming perfect. It begins by becoming honest. When you begin to turn inward, the noise of the world grows loud. Distractions multiply. You notice how easily you reach for your phone, how quickly you fill silence with activity, how uncomfortable you feel when left alone with your thoughts. This is not coincidence. It is resistance. For the moment you stop running, the buried voices begin to rise. They speak of the dreams you abandoned, the parts of yourself you silenced, the emotions you refused to feel. And they ask you, quietly but persistently, who are you really? This question cannot be answered with words, for words belong to the mind, and the mind knows only labels. The self that you are seeking is not something that can be described or contained. It is not your name, your story, your profession, or even your personality. These are only costumes worn by something infinitely larger. What you truly are is what remains when the costumes fall away. The awareness that watches the play of life unfold. The tragedy is that most people spend their lives mistaking the mask for the actor. They believe that their thoughts define them, that their history confines them, that their fears predict them. But who is it that sees the thoughts? Who is it that observes the story? If you close your eyes and turn attention inward, you may sense it, the silent witness beneath all experience, untouched by pleasure or pain, success or failure. That witness is the true self, and it has been waiting patiently for you to notice. Finding yourself is not about becoming someone new. It is about remembering what you have always been. The self is not discovered through effort, but revealed through surrender. You do not dig for it like treasure. You allow it to emerge by removing what hides it. And what hides it most is fear, fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of being seen as you are. But these fears are illusions. They arise only because we have mistaken our temporary identity for the truth of our being. When you realize that you are not your image, not your achievements, not your reputation, then fear begins to dissolve. Still, the journey inward is not easy. It requires immense courage to face what you have denied, to look at your own darkness without condemnation, to forgive yourself for the times you betrayed your own soul, to sit in the discomfort of not knowing who you are. But this is the sacred task of every human being, for only through confronting your inner divisions can you become whole again. Jung called this process individuation, the integration of the conscious and the unconscious, the reconciliation of all that you are. It is not the path of becoming good in the moral sense, but of becoming real. It is to allow the entire spectrum of your humanity to exist without denial. When the shadow is brought into awareness, it no longer controls you from the dark. When the persona is seen for what it is, it no longer imprisons you in performance. In this freedom, something miraculous begins to happen. You begin to feel alive again. Not the shallow excitement of external pleasure, but the quiet joy of authenticity. You stop living to impress and start living to express. You stop chasing approval and start following your inner rhythm. You no longer measure your worth by comparison because you realize that you were never in competition with anyone. Life ceases to be a test and becomes a dance. And perhaps this is what it truly means to find yourself, to discover that the self was never lost, only obscured by layers of conditioning. The real you was there all along, waiting beneath the noise, beneath the expectations, beneath the endless search to be enough. To find yourself is not to travel to distant lands or to collect spiritual experiences. It is simply to stop running away from what you already are. When you finally begin to listen to that quiet presence within you, life changes in subtle but profound ways. You start noticing synchronicities, little coincidences that seem to whisper that you are on the right path. You feel a gentle harmony between your inner and outer worlds. The same world that once felt hostile or indifferent begins to mirror your own awakening. For as you become more real, reality itself becomes more alive. It is here, in this stillness, that life truly begins, not when you have perfected yourself, not when you have found all the answers, but when you have finally stopped pretending. The beginning of awakening is not a grand revelation, but a quiet return, a remembering of something ancient and familiar. You realize that you were never separate, never incomplete, never broken. You were only asleep in the dream of becoming someone else. To wake from that dream is to be reborn, to see yourself not as a role being played, but as the consciousness that animates all roles. And in that realization, the endless striving falls away. What remains is peace, not the peace of escape, but the peace of truth. And perhaps that is where we can say, gently and without hurry, that life does not begin when you achieve something, or when you fix yourself, or when the world finally understands you. Life begins when you find yourself, when you stop searching for meaning in things and people, and realize that meaning has always been the nature of your being. There comes a time when the search for yourself begins to feel less like a journey outward and more like a quiet unfolding inward. You start to notice that every experience, pleasant or painful, was never random. Each one was shaping you, revealing another layer of who you are, beneath the noise of who you were told to be. The heartbreaks that once broke you now appear as moments of awakening. The failures that shamed you now seem like sacred detours. The endless striving to be someone else begins to feel heavy, unnecessary, almost absurd, because what you have been searching for has always been here, hidden beneath the effort to find it. To find yourself is not to arrive at a fixed destination. It is to return again and again to the living awareness that is already present within you. You are not a puzzle to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. The deeper you go, the less you find answers, and the more you find presence. Because the real self cannot be defined by words, only experienced in the stillness between them. When you are truly yourself, there is no image to maintain, no role to perform, no distance between what you feel and what you express. There is only being. Carl Jung described this as individuation, but it is something far more ancient than any theory. It is the same process spoken of by sages across time, the awakening of the soul to its own completeness. When you stop identifying with the mask, when you cease resisting the shadow, when you allow both the light and darkness to coexist within you without judgment, something extraordinary happens. You begin to sense a harmony, a rhythm, as though the entire universe is breathing with you. You realize that your life was never a mistake, that every path, even the crooked ones, was leading you back home. The mind resists this truth because it wants control. It prefers clear answers solid definitions, boundaries between what is good and bad, right and wrong, self and other. But reality does not operate in such simple lines. Life is fluid, dynamic, paradoxical. You cannot find yourself by clinging to one side of the equation. You must embrace the whole. The mind wants to label the shadow as evil, but the shadow often carries your greatest wisdom. It holds the raw energy of passion, creativity, and courage that you once buried. When you learn to meet it with love instead of fear, that energy transforms. It no longer sabotages your life, it enriches it. Imagine standing before a vast mirror that reflects not just your surface, but every hidden aspect of your being. At first, you resist what you see, the imperfections, the contradictions, the desires you wish you didn't have. But as you continue to look, the resistance softens. You begin to see beauty even in the brokenness. You begin to see innocence in the mistakes, lessons in the pain. And somewhere in that acceptance, something shifts. You no longer feel the need to become someone else. You start to feel a quiet reverence for the person you already are. This is the birth of wholeness. It is not perfection, but inclusion. To be whole is to allow everything within you to belong. Every fear, every dream, every wound, every joy. Nothing is rejected. Nothing is exiled. You begin to realize that what you once called your flaws were simply unloved parts of yourself asking to come home. When you stop fighting them, they reveal their hidden gifts. Anger becomes strength. Sadness becomes compassion. Fear becomes awareness. In this transformation, life begins to move through you effortlessly, without resistance. Many people believe awakening means escaping the world, withdrawing into isolation, rising above the noise of daily life. But the truth is the opposite. To awaken is to enter life fully, to see the sacred in the ordinary, to meet each moment as it is. When you are yourself, the world ceases to be an obstacle. It becomes a mirror of your inner state. You begin to notice that the people who challenge you the most are also your greatest teachers. They reveal where you are still clinging, where you are still afraid to love. In this sense, every encounter becomes part of your awakening. It is not the search for peace that brings peace, but the end of resistance to what is. You find freedom not by controlling life, but by allowing it to unfold. When you stop trying to become something other than what you are, the illusion of separation dissolves. You begin to see that the self and life are not two different things. They are the same flow, the same current moving through form and formlessness alike. The trees, the clouds, the laughter of strangers, the stillness between your thoughts, all of it is you, appearing in countless shapes. The ego fears this realization because it thrives on separation. It says, I am this, and in saying so, it limits what you can be. But when you begin to see through the ego, not as an enemy but as a temporary tool, you discover something vast. You realize that awareness itself, the consciousness that observes, feels, and experiences, has no boundaries. It has no age, no gender, no identity. It is infinite, timeless, untouched. The more you rest in that awareness, the lighter everything becomes. You begin to live not from fear, but from flow. You begin to act not from need, but from fullness. The mind wants to fix itself, to improve itself endlessly. It chases healing, transformation, enlightenment, as if they were things to be achieved. But what if there is nothing to fix? What if the real healing happens not by doing, but by being? When you stop trying to become whole and simply rest in the wholeness that already exists within you, something miraculous occurs. The tension dissolves. The struggle ends. Life begins to move through you naturally, like a river finding its way to the sea. Every day offers you an opportunity to remember this truth. Each time you pause, breathe, and simply allow yourself to exist without judgment, you are touching your true nature. It does not demand grand revelations or spiritual rituals. It reveals itself in the quiet moments, the stillness of early morning, the warmth of sunlight on your skin, the deep breath that softens your chest. The truth is not hidden in some distant philosophy. It is here, in the simplicity of being alive. Carl Jung once said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. To find yourself, then, is to wake up from the trance of unconscious living. It is to see that the patterns that once ruled you were never stronger than your awareness of them. The moment you see them clearly, their power dissolves. Awareness is the light that frees you from the prison of repetition. When you begin to live from awareness, your sense of identity expands. You no longer see yourself as a small being struggling in a vast universe. You see yourself as the universe experiencing itself through a particular form. The boundaries between inner and outer, self and other, begin to blur. You realize that every encounter, every emotion, every experience is part of the same dance. The same consciousness that moves the stars moves you. And so, the great paradox of finding yourself is that it leads to the realization that there was never a separate self to begin with. What you truly are is not confined to a body or a story. You are the space in which all stories arise and dissolve. You are the awareness in which all thoughts, emotions, and sensations appear. The self you have been seeking is not something to acquire. It is the seeing itself. When you understand this, you stop searching. You begin to live. Life begins the moment you stop trying to fix the past or control the future. It begins when you allow this moment, exactly as it is, to be enough. When you rest in that simple presence, the weight of becoming falls away. You realize that you were never incomplete, never broken, never lost. You were simply asleep to your own depth. And now you are awake. Life does not begin when you become someone new. It begins when you remember who you are, the timeless awareness behind all change. To find yourself is to see through the illusion of separation and to realize that you have always been home. And from that place of quiet knowing, you begin to live not as a seeker, but as the song itself.
You see, living merely to await a brilliant tomorrow is the most refined way to steal one's own life. Imagine you're walking up an endless staircase. In Latin, gradius means step, and we call the years of schooling grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, then graduation, gradus, gradus, gradus. You climb and climb, as if each step were a promise of something greater. Finally, when you stand at the very top, perhaps as the chairman of a massive corporation, you suddenly feel a strange emptiness. You've conquered everything, but now what? There are no more steps to climb, and since you were never taught how to pause, to breathe, to feel this moment, you become lost in your own victory. Our education system, with all its seriousness and structure, never guides you on how to exist right in the breath of the present. It only trains you to postpone joy, to push everything into a vague future. Then one day, when you're exhausted from all those gradus, an insurance agent knocks on the door and whispers, "I have the perfect thing for you, a retirement plan. Just be patient until you're 65, when you leave the work grind, and you'll truly live, truly enjoy." Enjoy what? Exactly. With prostate pains, hormonal changes, dentures, and all the annoyances of old age. That's an empty promise, a way to extend the deferral of life. The art of living in the eternal moment, what people call now, is never taught in classrooms. Why? Because it's seen as irresponsible, lazy, lacking ambition. But listen, enjoying life isn't a luxury. It's the most basic human duty. If you don't learn how to do it, you'll become a burden to yourself and the world around you. You'll grow aggressive, seek to seize, manipulate others, turn into a power-mad tyrant, all because you haven't grasped the simple, cheap secret of being fully present in this second. In truth, sustaining a human life doesn't require that much energy. Think about it. How much food is enough? What do you wear to cover and warm yourself? How much space do you need to dwell? It all boils down to needs so basic they're almost simplistic. And that simplicity opens the door to savoring the most refined things. Watching a raindrop slide down the window pane, feeling how it curves, how light refracts, how it merges with the world outside. That's a free performance, a masterpiece of the universe. But if you tell someone you're entranced by it, they'll shake their head. Are you crazy? Why not do something more important? More important here means what? It means causing disruption, intervening, progressing. We're indoctrinated with the idea that a person's value lies in changing the world, in pushing everything forward. We confuse natural growth, like trees growing, with progress as defined by humans. Without a grand project, without bustling activity, without future goals, you're labeled lazy, useless. But those who don't chase the future say, you're the crazy ones. You work to accumulate for a tomorrow that never comes, while we live fully today. Look at how a traditional Chinese person works. He labors just enough to have money, then stops, goes to a tea house, gambles a bit, smokes a pipe, or simply wanders admiring the scenery. We call that irresponsible, not maintaining the world properly. But perhaps that way of living is the true maintenance. Perhaps we, with our Protestant work ethic of ceaseless labor, with the belief that everything must be controlled, must progress, are the ones destroying the planet. We eradicate diseases, extend lifespans, but end up creating nuclear bombs to wipe it all out. That's the logical outcome of living for the future, promising forever, and when there's nothing left to promise, only destruction remains. Peoples untouched by the whirlpool of politics, Native American tribes, indigenous Mexicans, Africans, don't understand us, and we don't understand them, because they have no desire for what we call an ideal society. A few were convinced, like in Japan. They plunged into Western-style industrialization, and now cities like Nara, Osaka, Kobe are choked in smog, Tokyo a chaotic nightmare. They're reaping the consequences of chasing the illusion of the future. In the Hindu worldview, time is a cycle called yuga, starting from a golden age, then gradually declining, everything just unraveling over the ages. That's a reminder, escape the wheel of time, escape that rat race. This very idea underlies the political philosophy of redirection that I propose. Lead Western people out of history, out of the belief that we're in a process leading to something better forever. In reality, that process only leads to ever greater destruction. Live a timeless way of life, indefinite, far more appealing than a life devoted to time. Technology isn't the enemy. It brings the power to completely eliminate poverty. But if we view technology through the lens of history, as part of unending progress, it will fail. The distribution problem of wealth from technology isn't material, it's psychological. People are hypnotized by money, seeing it as having intrinsic value instead of just a symbol. Imagine a cosmic joke. Money, which we worship like a god, is really just numbers dancing in ledgers. Krishna once said gold is one of humanity's great calamities, not because the metal shines, but because we mistake the symbol for reality. There's a funny story I like to retell. Long ago, banks around the world got tired of shipping physical gold across oceans, so they set up a central island in the Pacific. All the gold was gathered there, in a massive vault. For exchanges, they'd just push carts of gold down a short street between branches. Everything ran smoothly for a decade. Then one day, the bank owners brought their wives and kids to visit the island. Threw a grand party. They checked the books. Perfect. Finally, the kids clamored, "Dad, show us the gold." The vault managers started stammering, sweating. It's a bit difficult. It needs some preparation. The bank owner barked, "Nonsense. Show the kids the gold now." Finally, the truth came out. 7 years earlier, a submarine earthquake had swallowed the entire vault. But don't worry, they still recorded exactly how much gold each side owned in the books. So the gold was gone, but the value remained. On paper, we laugh uproariously, but that's exactly how the world works today. Money isn't gold, isn't resources, isn't real wealth, just promises, signs, collective magic. The US dollar prints. The United States government promises to pay $1. Pay with what? Another piece of paper. Money is debt, credit, packaged faith. The problem isn't lack of food, housing, clothing, technology produces in surplus. The problem is we're hypnotized by numbers on bank screens. We burn food in America while children starve in India, not because of shortage, but because the books don't balance. That's a refined form of madness. We can feed the whole planet, but let millions starve just for a symbol. The solution sounds equally mad. Reverse taxation. Instead of collecting from people, issue credit, but credit tied to actual total output, not phantom gold or empty promises. Then everyone can exchange what they create without monetary barriers blocking them. This isn't an economic issue. It's psychological. We're trapped in the illusion called Maya in Indian philosophy, the veil over reality. The future is part of that veil. We live as if tomorrow is when life really begins. Imagine you're a donkey with a fishing pole around your neck, a carrot dangling at the end right in front of your nose. You walk and walk, the carrot always there, always in reach, but never touched. That's the perfect image of modern man. We chase the future, chase retirement, chase when I'm rich then, when I retire then, when the kids are grown then, and when you finally bite the carrot, achieve the goal, you realize it's just a plastic fake, or worse, it's long withered. Classical Eastern people don't fall into this trap. They work just enough to live, then stop. They don't see work as life's purpose, but as a means. A Japanese blacksmith might spend the morning forging a blade, then the afternoon sitting watching cherry blossoms fall. We call that laziness. They call it living. When you're not obsessed with the future, you don't need infinite accumulation. You don't need a big house, fancy car, overflowing closet, because you don't use them to fill an inner void. That void can only be filled by presence, hearing leaves rustle, feeling the warmth of a teacup in your hand, smelling earth after rain. But our society is built on fear of scarcity. We're taught that if we don't accumulate, don't prepare, don't progress, we'll fall into misery. So we run forever, like hamsters on a wheel. And the wheel spins so fast we don't realize we're standing still. Technology advances, the wheel spins faster. We have washing machines, dishwashers, cars, planes, all to save time. Save time for what? To work more, earn more, buy more time savers. The perfect circle of meaninglessness. Meanwhile, a farmer in Bali might spend the day sitting under a coconut tree, watching waves crash. He has no insurance, no retirement fund, no 5-year plan. But he has what we've lost, peace in this moment. He doesn't wait for tomorrow to live, because he knows tomorrow is just a notion. Today is all he has, and today is enough. We need a revolution not in politics, not in economics, but in perception. Redirect people away from history, away from the story that we're progressing toward a future paradise. History is a linear tale, from primitive to civilized, from poverty to prosperity, from war to peace. But reality isn't linear. Reality is cyclical. Birth, dwelling, change, extinction. Every empire collapses. Every technology obsolesces. Every future promise vanishes. Only this moment is real. Technology can be a tool for liberation, if used right. Imagine, machines do all heavy work, automate food production, energy, housing. People don't need to work 8 hours a day. We could work 2 hours, or nothing at all, and still have enough. But for that to happen, we must abandon the illusion of money as a measure of value. We must abandon the belief that hard work is moral. We must learn to live without future goals. Now let's step together into an imaginary garden. Not a manicured Versailles type, but a wild garden where grass grows haphazardly, flowers bloom by season, and no one bothers to prune. Here, time isn't the enemy, it's a companion. A butterfly lands on a petal. You stop to watch, not to record or photograph, but just because it's happening. That's timeless living. No schedule, no destination, only presence. But this garden isn't far away. It's right in the breath you're taking, in the bird song outside the window, in the feel of your hand on the wooden table. Our society fears that garden. We're taught that without plans, goals, a mission, life is meaningless. Try telling your boss you want a day off to watch clouds drift. He'll think you've lost your mind. Try telling friends you don't need a promotion, a bigger house. They'll worry about your future. We're imprisoned in an invisible jail with bars made of promises. Just try a little harder and you'll be happy. But that little harder lasts a lifetime and happiness dangles out of reach. Look at how children play. A 3-year-old can spend hours stacking Lego, not to build the world's tallest tower, but for the joy of each brick clicking. It doesn't think about growing up to be an architect. It has no concept of wasted time. Then we adults step in and teach. Stop playing. Go study, so you can succeed later. We strip away their wild garden, replace it with an industrial field. Rows upon rows. Straight, efficient, but soulless. We adults once had that garden too, but lost it. We replace natural joy with conditional joy. I'll be happy when I have a degree, when I have a partner, when I have a house, when I have kids, when I retire. Each time we achieve, we set a new condition. That's how the ego, hypnotized by time, operates. In Taoist philosophy, Lao Tzu said, "The one who knows enough is rich." Not rich from owning much, but rich from needing nothing more. The Taoist elder's garden is just a thatched hut, a pine tree, a stream. But he sits there, smiling at drifting clouds, feeling he owns the universe. Technology, used rightly, can return the garden to us. Imagine a world where robots plant rice, machines weave cloth, solar power provides free electricity. People don't work to live. They work if they want, or do nothing. A painter paints because colors move him. A musician plays because sounds make him alive. No one asks, how much does your art contribute to GDP? No one measures life's value in work hours. That's not far-fetched utopia. It's possible today if we dare abandon the illusion of earning a living. But to abandon, we must face the greatest fear, that if we don't run, we'll fall into the abyss, that if we don't accumulate, we'll starve, that if we have no goals, we'll be empty. These fears are nurtured from childhood. Study hard for a good job later. Save so you don't suffer later. Work hard to rest later. All based on the premise that the present isn't enough, that only the future is worthwhile. But what is the future? It's a notion, a ghost. When you reach that future, it's become the present, and you need a new future. In Zen, there's a famous koan. Before enlightenment, I chopped wood, carried water. After enlightenment, I chopped wood, carried water. Nothing changes outside, but everything changes inside. Work is no longer a means to something. It is itself. Chopping wood is chopping wood. Carrying water is carrying water. Watching rain is watching rain. No, so that later. That's timeless living. Every action self-perfect, needing no reason beyond itself. Try a small experiment. For 10 minutes, do nothing. Just sit, breathe, look. No phone, no music, no thinking about to-do lists. At first you'll fidget. The brain will scream, wasting time, do something useful. But if you persist, a magical moment comes, stillness. You realize that without doing, you still exist, still complete. Those 10 minutes aren't lost. They're 10 minutes you truly lived. Our society doesn't teach this experiment. Schools teach math, literature, science, all aimed at later. No one teaches, today, sit still and feel your heartbeat. No one teaches, eat a bite of rice and really taste it. We're trained into efficient machines, but not into humans. The result? We can build rockets to Mars, but can't sit still for a minute without guilt. A friend once told me about his grandfather, a central Vietnamese farmer who only knew plowing fields, planting rice his whole life. No TV, no radio, no concept of retirement. Every evening he sat on the porch, smoked a water pipe, watched the moon, asked, "Do you have any dreams?" He laughed. "What are dreams? I have rice to eat, a place to sleep, the moon to watch. Enough." We laugh at his spiritual poverty. But perhaps we're the poor ones because we don't know enough. Technology can help us return to the garden, but only if we change our view. Instead of using machines to produce more, use them to need less. Instead of building factories for jobs, build parks for people to play. Instead of inventing apps to save time, invent ways for people to enjoy time. That's the real revolution. Not changing the outer world, but the inner. Imagine a morning without an alarm. No bell, no meetings, no urgent messages. You open your eyes, sunlight filters through leaves, and instead of jumping up, you lie there, listening to your own breath. That's not laziness. It's the first time in years you've allowed yourself to be here. Not so that later, not because I must earn a living, just be here. That moment isn't in a 5-year plan, not rated by KPIs, not needing social media posts. It's yours, and only yours. Now, scale that moment to a whole society. A society that no longer uses clocks to measure human value. A society where schools teach kids to watch clouds instead of competing for grades. A society where occupation isn't a business card, but how you choose to express joy. A baker bakes because he loves the smell of rising dough. A storyteller tells because she loves kids' eyes lighting up. No one asks, "What's your salary?" But, does it make you come alive? Sounds fanciful? Actually, we have all the tools to make it real today. Automated agriculture can feed 8 billion with land smaller than a province. Solar, wind, geothermal can provide unlimited power without bills. 3D printers can create homes, clothes, tools in hours. The problem isn't scarcity, but distribution. And distribution is stuck in the money maze. Money is no longer a medium of exchange. It's become the end. We work for money, use money to buy time, then work to make up lost time. The perfect circle of madness. Break the circle with a simple idea. Universal credit tied to real output. Everyone gets enough credit to live comfortably. Not to be rich, but to be free. This credit doesn't accumulate. No interest, no debt. It's created corresponding to actual goods and services society produces. Want bread? Yes. Want a house? Yes. Want to learn painting? Yes. No one has to earn it by selling 8 hours of life daily. Work becomes choice, not obligation. An engineer might spend 3 months on clean energy research, then 6 months fishing. A teacher might teach in winter, wander admiring flowers in summer. No one gets fired for inefficiency. Efficiency is measured by joy, not profit. But for this to happen, we must abandon 2 great illusions. 1, the future is where we'll live. 2, money is the measure of value. The first illusion we've discussed much. The future is the carrot on the stick. When you get there, it's past, and you need a new carrot. The second is subtler. We believe a piece of paper, a screen number, has power to decide who eats, who sleeps, who lives. But money is just collective belief. If the world agrees a seashell is money, it is. If the world agrees universal credit is fair, it will be. The problem isn't technical. It's that we haven't dared to believe. Try a thought experiment. Suppose tomorrow all money vanishes. No dollars, euros, yen. Only goods. Rice, cloth, houses, cars. What do? You barter. I give you a sack of rice. You give me a meter of cloth. I fix your roof. You teach my kid math. We'd quickly realize value lies in actions, not symbols. Money is just simplifying exchange at scale. But when scale distorts reality, when someone starves beside a granary because no money, it's no longer a tool, but chains. Technology can replace those chains with direct exchange. Blockchain, AI, IoT sensors can track real output and distribute credit instantly. No central banks, no governments taxing. Everyone has a digital wallet tied to basic needs. Want more? Create value, not by working hard, but by doing what you love. A good song, a joke, a beautiful garden, all value. AI calculates and distributes. No one richer from hoarding, no one poorer from laziness. Wealth becomes ability to enjoy, not to own. In that world, retirement ceases to exist because no one works waiting to retire. Kids don't learn for jobs, but to understand the world. Elders aren't shoved into nursing homes, but invited to tell stories under trees. Artists don't starve because market doesn't need. Scientists don't beg grants to prove economic benefit. Everyone does because that's how they breathe. And when we no longer run, we'll discover a secret. Time isn't a resource, but space to live. Each moment is a small universe. Watching dew on a leaf isn't entertainment. It's meditation. Hearing music isn't pastime. It's communion with the infinite. Eating a meal isn't fueling. It's a ritual thanking earth and sky. When you live like that, you don't need rest because you've never worked in the old sense. You just are. Finally, return to the wild garden. The butterfly still lands on the flower. Clouds still drift. You sit there, no reason, no purpose. And in that moment you realize this isn't a break between tasks. This is humanity's real work, presence. All the gradius, all the promises, all the carrots.
You know, there's a peculiar kind of exhaustion that comes not from physical labor or even from emotional strain, but from the sheer relentless noise of your own thinking, the mind that simply will not stop, the constant commentary, the endless analysis, the perpetual conversation with yourself about yourself. And the strangest part of it all is that the more you try to quiet it down, the louder it seems to get. It's like trying to smooth water by slapping it. The very effort creates more disturbance. Now, most people assume that a busy mind is a sign of intelligence, of being thoughtful, of being engaged with life. We celebrate the thinker, don't we? We admire the person who's always analyzing, always questioning, always working things out in their head. But here's what nobody tells you. There's a difference between thinking and being trapped in thought. There's a difference between using your mind as a tool and being used by your mind as a prison. And if you're honest with yourself, you know what I'm talking about. You know that feeling of lying in bed at night while your mind rehearses conversations that haven't happened yet, replays conversations that already did, analyzes every little thing you said or didn't say, should have said, might say tomorrow. You know that experience of sitting in a beautiful place, surrounded by everything you thought you wanted, and barely being present for any of it because your mind is somewhere else entirely, chewing on some problem, spinning some story, lost in some elaborate maze of its own construction. The mind won't shut up because, and here's the paradox, you keep asking it to. You see, every time you tell yourself to stop thinking, what are you doing? You're thinking about not thinking. You're using thought to try to eliminate thought. It's like trying to use fire to put out fire. The very attempt is the problem. The thinker trying to stop thinking is itself a thought. So the mind just keeps going, now thinking about why it's thinking about how to stop thinking about how tired it is of thinking. And so it spirals. You notice your mind is busy, and you judge it. You shouldn't be thinking so much. You should be more present. You should be more peaceful, more mindful, more zen. And now you're thinking about not thinking, judging yourself for thinking, planning how to think less, analyzing why you think so much. The mind has taken the project of quieting itself and turned it into just another thing to think about, another problem to solve, another way to keep itself busy. But here's what's really happening underneath all of this mental noise. The mind won't shut up because it's terrified, absolutely terrified. Of what, you ask? Of nothing. Literally. The mind is terrified of the gap, the space, the moment of no thought. Because the mind, you see, thinks it is you. It believes that if it stops, you stop. If there's no thought, there's no self. So it keeps generating content, keeps producing commentary, keeps the stream going at all costs because silence feels like death to the thinking mind. Think about it. When was the last time you experienced a genuine gap in thinking? And I don't mean sleep. I don't mean being knocked unconscious. I mean a moment of waking awareness where there simply was no thought, no commentary, no analysis, no planning, no remembering, just pure perception without interpretation. For most people, these moments are incredibly rare, fleeting, accidental, a sudden shock, a moment of awe, a split second before thought catches up with experience. And if you've had even one of these moments, you know something profound. You didn't disappear. You were still there. In fact, you were more there, more present, more alive than you are when the mind is running its constant show. But the mind doesn't trust this. The mind is convinced that it needs to keep narrating your life or else there won't be a life to narrate. It's like a radio that's terrified of being turned off. So it keeps broadcasting static rather than risk silence. And you You've identified so completely with the broadcast that you think you are the static. You think the noise is you. So of course you can't turn it off. You'd be turning yourself off. This is why meditation is so difficult for most people. They sit down with the intention of quieting the mind, and the mind immediately goes into overdrive, because now it's been directly challenged. Now there's a you trying to control it, and it responds by getting louder, more insistent, more chaotic. It throws everything at you: memories, plans, itches, philosophical questions, random songs, shopping lists, anything and everything to keep the show going. And you sit there fighting with it, trying to push thoughts away, and the more you push, the more they push back. Here's another paradox for you. The mind won't shut up because you want it to shut up. Your desire for a quiet mind is itself a form of mental noise. It's the mind complaining about itself, critiquing itself, trying to improve itself. It's thought trying to eliminate thought. So the wanting becomes just another layer of thinking. Now you're not just thinking, you're thinking about thinking, judging your thinking, trying to stop thinking, and feeling like a failure because you can't stop thinking. The original problem has multiplied, and we've created entire industries around this, haven't we? Mindfulness apps, meditation retreats, books on how to quiet your mind, courses on being present, all of which can be helpful, certainly. But notice what often happens. The mind takes these tools and turns them into just another project, another thing to achieve, another way to measure yourself, another standard you're failing to meet. You're not just a person with a busy mind anymore. Now you're a person who's failing at meditation, who can't even do mindfulness right, who's so hopeless that even when you're trying to be present, you're thinking about whether you're being present correctly. The thinking never stops because we've made thinking into our primary mode of being. We think about what we're going to do, then we do it while thinking about whether we're doing it right. Then we think about what we did and whether we should have done it differently. We think about the past with regret. We think about the future with anxiety. And we miss the present entirely because we're too busy thinking about it to actually be in it. And the content of the thinking, it doesn't even matter most of the time. It's not like you're solving profound problems or having brilliant insights. Most of it is just repetitive loops. The same worries recycled in slightly different forms. The same stories told and retold. The same arguments rehearsed. The same plans made and revised. It's like watching the same movie over and over, and not even a good movie, just a anxious, repetitive, self-absorbed drama starring you as both the hero and the villain and the critic reviewing the performance. But here's what's really exhausting about it. The mind that won't shut up is also the mind that won't commit. It can't fully engage with anything because it's always partially somewhere else. You're in one conversation while thinking about another conversation. You're doing one task while planning the next task. You're experiencing one moment while comparing it to past moments or imagining future moments. You're never fully anywhere because your attention is fractured across time, split between what was, what is, and what might be. And people sense this about you, even if they can't name it. They sense that you're not fully present, that part of you is always elsewhere, always distracted, always thinking about something other than what's right in front of you. And this creates a kind of loneliness, doesn't it? Because even when you're with people, even when you're supposedly connecting, there's this gap, this distance, this sense that you're not really there. You're performing being there while your mind is running its endless program somewhere in the background.
Before we continue, many of you have been asking for something longer, something with actual practices you can use in daily life. So check out the 3-hour audiobook that takes everything we explore in these videos and gives you the tools to actually work with it. Because here's the thing, intellectual understanding without practical application just keeps you spinning in your head. You need both, the insight and the practice, the philosophy and the daily work that makes it real. This audiobook gives you that. 3 hours of deep wisdom with practices built in, so you're not just thinking differently, you're living differently. If you're serious about changing how you experience your life, the link is in the description below. Now, let's continue.
So what do you do about a mind that won't shut up? Well, here's where it gets interesting. You don't do anything about it. And this is perhaps the greatest paradox of all. The solution to the problem of the busy mind is to stop trying to solve it. The way to quiet the mind is to stop trying to quiet it, because the trying is the noise. The effort to fix yourself is what's broken. You see, the mind isn't actually a problem. It never was. The problem is your relationship with the mind. You think you're supposed to control it, manage it, optimize it, quiet it, but that's like trying to control the weather. The mind does what minds do. It thinks. It produces thoughts the way the heart produces beats and the lungs produce breaths. Thoughts arise. This is natural. This is what minds are for. The suffering doesn't come from the thoughts themselves. It comes from your relationship with the thoughts, from believing them, identifying with them, taking them as truth, taking them as you. When a thought arises that says you're not good enough, you don't have to believe it. You don't have to identify with it. You don't have to take it personally. It's just a thought, a pattern of neural activity, a wave in the ocean of consciousness. It arises and it passes, and you, the awareness that notices it, you remain. But we've been taught to take thoughts very seriously. We've been taught that what we think is who we are, that our thoughts are our identity. So when we have an anxious thought, we become an anxious person. When we have a depressive thought, we become a depressed person. When we have a mean thought, we become a bad person. We collapse the space between the awareness and the content of awareness. We identify with the passing weather and forget we're the sky. Here's what I want you to understand. You are not your thoughts. You never were. You are the space in which thoughts appear. You are the awareness that knows thoughts are happening. And this awareness, this consciousness, it doesn't have a busy mind. It doesn't have any mind at all. It's prior to mind, deeper than mind, more fundamental than mind. The thoughts come and go in you, but you don't come and go. You're the constant. You're what remains when thoughts arise and when thoughts disappear. And here's the beautiful thing. When you recognize this, when you shift your identity from the content of consciousness to consciousness itself, the thoughts don't stop, but they lose their grip. They become like clouds passing through the sky. Sometimes there are many clouds, sometimes few, sometimes none. But the sky doesn't worry about the clouds. The sky doesn't try to push them away or hold them in place. The sky just is, spacious and open, allowing whatever appears to appear and whatever disappears to disappear. This is what it means to have a quiet mind. Not a mind with no thoughts, but a mind you're no longer struggling with. Not a mind you've controlled, but a mind you've stopped trying to control. The paradox is that the mind becomes quiet when you stop trying to make it quiet. The noise settles when you stop resisting the noise, because the resistance is the noise. The struggle is the disturbance. When you stop fighting with your mind, when you stop judging it, managing it, trying to improve it, there's a natural settling. Like a snow globe that's been shaken. You don't make the snow settle. You just stop shaking it and the settling happens by itself. But here's what this requires. It requires you to be willing to have a busy mind, to let the thoughts be there without making them a problem, to allow the mental chatter without needing it to stop. And this feels counterintuitive, doesn't it? Because you think you want a quiet mind, but wanting a quiet mind is what keeps the mind busy. So instead, you try the opposite. You welcome the busy mind, you say yes to it, you stop fighting it. And in that acceptance, in that allowing, something shifts. The mind is still producing thoughts, but you're no longer caught in them. You're no longer believing that the thoughts are you or that they're telling you the truth about reality. This is what meditation is really about, by the way. It's not about achieving some special state of no thought. It's about changing your relationship with thought. It's about learning to observe thinking without being thinking, to witness the mind without being the mind. You sit there and thoughts arise, thousands of them. And you don't push them away and you don't chase them. You just notice them. Oh, there's a thought about what I'm having for dinner. Oh, there's a thought about what that person said yesterday. Oh, there's a thought judging my meditation. And in the noticing, there's a gap, a space. You're here, aware, watching the thoughts, which means you're not the thoughts, you're what's watching. And the more you practice this, the more you live from this place of awareness rather than from the place of thought, the less the busy mind bothers you. Not because the mind gets less busy, but because you stop identifying with the business. You recognize that you're the space, not the furniture. You are the screen, not the movie. You're the ocean, not the waves. And the waves can be stormy or calm, but the ocean remains the ocean either way. Here's another angle on this. The mind won't shut up because it's trying to figure everything out. It believes that if it just thinks hard enough, long enough, cleverly enough, it will finally understand. It will finally solve the puzzle of existence. It will finally figure out how to be happy, how to be safe, how to be loved, how to be enough. So it keeps thinking, keeps analyzing, keeps trying to find the answer that will finally put all the questions to rest. But the answer isn't in thought. It can't be. Because thought is always about something. It's always pointing at reality, describing reality, interpreting reality. But it's never the reality itself. You can think about an apple all day long, describe it in the most elaborate detail, but you still won't know what an apple tastes like until you bite into it. The taste is direct, immediate, beyond thought, and life is like that. The actual living of it, the immediate experience of being here, being alive, being aware, this isn't something you can think your way into. You can only be it. So the mind keeps chattering because it's trying to do something it's inherently unable to do. It's trying to think its way to a reality that exists before and beyond thinking. And this is why the silence, the gap, the moment of no thought, this is where the real knowing happens. Not intellectual knowing, but direct knowing. The knowing of being, of presence, of what you actually are beneath all the stories and concepts and identifications. And when you touch this, even for a moment, when you rest as pure awareness without any thought, you realize something extraordinary. The mind, with all its noise and business, it was never the problem. It was just doing its job, thinking. The problem was believing you were the mind, taking yourself to be this collection of thoughts and worries and plans and memories. But you're not. You never were. You're the awareness in which all of this appears, the consciousness that lights up every experience, the presence that's here right now, reading these words, aware of being aware. So if your mind won't shut up, stop trying to shut it up. Let it run, let it chatter, let it do its thing, but don't believe it, don't identify with it, don't take it to be you. Just notice it, watch it, be curious about it. Oh, look, mind is doing its anxious routine again. Oh, look, mind is replaying that old story. Oh, look, mind is planning something that probably won't happen. And in the noticing, in the observing, you're already free. Because the one who notices the thought is not the thought. The awareness of thinking is not thinking. You are that awareness. You always have been. And from this place, from this recognition, life becomes much simpler, not because your circumstances change or your mind becomes quieter, but because you're no longer at war with yourself. You're no longer trying to be different than you are. The mind thinks, the thoughts arise, and you remain as what you've always been, aware, present, here. The one constant in the midst of all the change. Not thinking about being here, not trying to be more here, just here, already, always, complete. There comes a moment, often quietly, when you realize you no longer know what you're doing. Not in the sense that you've forgotten your plans, but in the deeper sense when all the plans you've made stop making sense. You wake up one morning, and though nothing looks different, everything feels different. The job, the relationships, the daily routines, all the things that once gave you a sense of direction suddenly feel hollow, like a script you've memorized but no longer believe in. And the strangest thing about it is that it doesn't always come with sadness. Sometimes it's just a blankness, a strange, gentle emptiness where the meaning used to be. You move through your day as though underwater, hearing people speak, watching yourself respond, but somewhere inside knowing that none of it feels alive anymore. This is the moment when most people panic, because for so long we've been taught that purpose is everything, that life must always be aimed towards something, a goal, a mission, a destination. We spend years building an identity around what we do, what we achieve, what we produce. So when the compass stops pointing anywhere, it feels like the end of something essential. But it isn't the end. It's the beginning. You see, this confusion, this uncertainty, is not a mistake in the system. It is the system. Life has a way of dissolving the structures we outgrow. It takes away the illusions we cling to until we finally notice that they were illusions. It removes the things we think we can't live without, and in doing so, reveals that we were never living through them to begin with. To not know what you're doing anymore is to stand at the threshold of a deeper truth, because only when the outer purpose collapses can the inner purpose emerge. Only when you stop knowing with your mind can you start listening with your being. Most people try to escape this stage. They distract themselves, fill the silence with noise, or rush to find a new project, a new meaning, a new dream to chase. But the more you run, the more lost you become. The feeling doesn't leave because it isn't meant to. It's not a symptom of something wrong. It's an invitation, a call from life itself to stop pretending you're in control. Think of the ocean. When the waves crash, the surface looks chaotic, unpredictable. But deep down, the water is still. When you lose your sense of direction, you are being pulled downward into that stillness. The storm of the mind begins to lose its power, and something quieter begins to appear beneath it. But because we've spent our lives identifying with the storm, we fear the calm. The mind says, if I stop chasing, I'll fall behind. If I stop knowing, I'll disappear. Yet the truth is that the one who feels lost was never the real you. The self that needs direction is only the surface self, the mask that performs for the world. The one beneath it doesn't need direction at all, because it never left home. This is why the ancient teachers spoke of the power of not knowing. Because to not know is to become teachable again. It is to return to innocence, not ignorance, but openness. The kind of awareness a child has when they look at the world without trying to control it. When you are no longer certain of what you're doing, life begins to show you what it's been doing all along. You begin to see that things move by themselves, that the heart beats, the lungs breathe, the planets spin, the seasons change, all without your interference. You begin to realize that the world is not asking you to manage it, it's asking you to participate in it, and there's a vast difference between the two. Participation means allowing yourself to be moved by life, not pushing it forward with effort and will. It's dancing with the rhythm rather than dictating the steps. And that's why losing your sense of direction can feel so disorienting, because you're shifting from being the choreographer to being the dancer. When you reach this stage, the mind tries to bargain. It says, if I can just understand what's happening, I'll feel safe again. But life doesn't owe you understanding. It offers you something far more profound experience. And understanding comes later, in the quiet moments when you realize that what felt like loss was actually transformation in disguise. Every meaningful change begins in confusion. Caterpillars do not know they are becoming butterflies. They simply dissolve. The same is true for you. The life you thought you were building is dissolving so that a more truthful one can emerge, not designed by your mind, but discovered by your being. So, when you find yourself in that fog, don't rush to clear it. Sit with it. Let it unfold at its own pace, because that fog is not a failure of clarity. It's the very process by which clarity arrives. You might look around and think everyone else knows what they're doing, but they don't. They're just better at pretending. Most people are following scripts written by fear, fear of being left behind, fear of insignificance, fear of stillness. You, however, have stepped off the stage. You've stopped acting long enough to hear the silence beneath the performance. And though it feels uncertain now, that silence is where the real music begins. Because the truth is, you don't need to know what you're doing to live a meaningful life. You only need to be here, aware, receptive, willing. The rest unfolds naturally. Think of how flowers bloom. They don't calculate the right moment. They open when the sun touches them. The same intelligence that moves the tides and births the stars is guiding your unfolding too. It doesn't need your constant interference. It needs your trust. This is the paradox of awakening, that we try so hard to find meaning, not realizing that meaning is what's trying to find us. It's been knocking on your door, waiting for you to stop rearranging the furniture long enough to hear it. You are not lost. You are simply being stripped of what can no longer come with you. And if you can stay open even when it hurts, even when it's unclear, you'll notice something miraculous happening. You'll stop trying to force the river and begin to flow with it. You'll realize that life was never something to solve, but something to experience. And then, without warning, you'll find yourself smiling again, not because you figured it out, but because you finally stopped trying to. You'll see that you were never meant to know every step of the path. You were only meant to walk it, one moment at a time, with wonder instead of control, with openness instead of certainty. And in that simple surrender, you'll rediscover something you forgot long ago, that not knowing is the most alive state there is. Because when you don't know what you're doing anymore, you are closer than ever to remembering who you really are. There comes a quiet moment after the confusion, when something in you stops struggling to make sense of it all. The mind, exhausted from trying to understand, begins to soften. And in that softening, you start to notice that life is still happening beautifully, rhythmically, indifferently. The trees still sway, the clouds still move. The wind still carries the scent of the earth. The same world that felt meaningless yesterday now begins to breathe with a strange kind of peace. Because the truth is, meaning never left you. You just buried it under the noise of needing to be someone. You thought purpose was something you could think your way into, when in fact it was something you could only return to. It was always there, beneath the tension, beneath the pretending, waiting for you to stop trying so hard to deserve it. There is an intelligence far older than your mind that has been guiding you since before you were born. It beats your heart, it grows your bones, it keeps you alive even when you forget to live. It doesn't need your permission or your plan. It only asks for your attention, not the kind that analyzes, but the kind that sees. You begin to realize that you were never supposed to figure life out, only to experience it fully. You were never supposed to have it all together. You were supposed to fall apart again and again until you saw that there was never anything to hold together in the first place. The falling was always part of the dance. When you stop trying to control the dance, life starts moving through you like music. You stop counting the steps. You start to feel the rhythm. And somewhere between the notes, between the breaths, you remember what you are. You are not the dancer. You are the dance itself. But this realization doesn't arrive with fireworks or revelation. It comes quietly, like the first light before dawn. You notice you're no longer rushing to escape yourself. You're no longer trying to trade this moment for another. You're simply here breathing, watching, existing. And that, you realize, has always been enough. You start to see that the moments you once called meaningless were never empty. They were simply unobserved. Life wasn't waiting to become significant. You were waiting to become present. And in that presence, even the smallest things begin to glow, the way sunlight dances on water, the way laughter spills out of nowhere, the way time slows down when you stop wishing it would move faster. These are not ordinary moments. They are the fabric of life itself, woven together by a quiet intelligence that asks for nothing in return. You once thought you needed a map to live. Now you realize you only needed to look around. You once believed you needed to understand your path. Now you see that the path itself was understanding you. Every detour, every delay, every collapse, it was all part of life's mysterious way of leading you home. You see, when you no longer know what you're doing, you finally allow life to do what it's been doing all along. You begin to trust the current instead of fighting it. You begin to rest, not in certainty, but in faith, not the kind of faith that believes in something, but the kind that simply allows everything. And it's here, in this quiet permission, that your life begins to breathe again. Because the truth is, clarity doesn't come from understanding everything. It comes from accepting that you never will. Peace doesn't come from solving your problems. It comes from seeing that you are not a problem to solve. When you stop forcing yourself into shapes that please the world, you realize the world was never asking you to change. It was only reflecting back your own misunderstanding of who you are. You are not behind. You are not lost. You are not late to anything. You are exactly where you were always meant to be in this moment, aware, alive, unfolding. And perhaps that's what you were meant to learn all along, that life was never about becoming something, but about remembering that you already are everything you've been searching for. When this realization begins to settle in, you notice something beautiful. You no longer crave answers the way you used to. The questions remain, but they no longer torment you. They simply exist, like stars scattered across the night, silent, mysterious, and somehow perfect in their distance. You no longer need to define yourself because you understand that whatever can be defined is not truly you. You no longer cling to roles or labels because you sense how fluid you've always been. You no longer try to fix the uncertainty because you see now that uncertainty is the space where life breathes. You stop needing to be certain to be free. You stop needing to be someone to be whole. And when this happens, a quiet joy begins to bloom, not the loud joy of achievement, but the soft joy of belonging. Belonging to nothing in particular, yet everything at once. You realize you were never separate from the flow you were trying to control. You were the flow itself, dreaming it was lost. And so you sit there, not knowing what's next, and for the first time, that's perfectly fine, because you sense that whatever comes will come through you, not against you. You don't need to chase your next chapter. It's already writing itself in the silence, in the waiting, in the very act of being alive. This is the grace of not knowing, that it leaves you open enough to finally see. You no longer have to pretend to be the one holding everything together. You can let go and trust that the hands of existence are far steadier than your own. And then, when you least expect it, life begins to move again, gently, effortlessly. Not because you forced it, but because you stopped blocking it. Not because you knew what to do, but because you allowed yourself to not know. You smile at the mystery of it all, the divine comedy of trying to plan infinity, and you understand that you were never lost. You were simply learning how to see again. So when you don't know what you're doing anymore, remember this: you don't need to. Life knows. It always has. And if you listen closely, you'll hear it whisper not in words, but in the rhythm of your own heart, that you are already home. After a while, you begin to notice that not knowing has its own kind of intelligence. It isn't confusion anymore. It's space, a vast, quiet openness that allows everything to be what it is. The mind, once frantic to decide and define, now learns to bow before something it cannot measure. At first, this feels disorienting, almost like losing the ground beneath your feet. You search for the next goal, the next explanation, the next identity that will anchor you again. But none of them fit. They feel too small, too artificial, too loud for the silence that's begun to bloom within you. So you stop chasing certainty, not out of defeat, but out of recognition. You realize that every certainty you've ever clung to has eventually dissolved, and yet something in you has remained untouched, unmoved, quietly aware. That awareness becomes your true home, your quiet refuge in the middle of life's noise. From that stillness, you begin to see the play more clearly. The constant striving, the endless self-improvement, the desperate need to prove your worth, all of it starts to look like a dream you finally awakened from. You smile, perhaps even laugh, at the absurdity of it. Because how could you ever improve upon something that was never broken? This realization does not make life dull. On the contrary, it makes everything radiant. When you stop trying to control the script, you begin to see the beauty of improvisation. You start to notice how every event, even the painful ones, carry a hidden rhythm, how each moment leads to the next, not through force, but through flow. You no longer see life as a staircase to climb, but as a river to enter. The river knows where it's going. You don't have to steer it. All you need to do is trust its current, and it will carry you exactly where you're meant to be. But trust is not passive. It is a living act. It means showing up without guarantees. It means stepping forward without knowing if the ground will appear beneath your feet. It means opening your heart, even when it has been broken before. It means daring to live without the armor of control, to love without the safety of certainty, to walk through the unknown as though it were your own home. In that trust, life begins to meet you halfway. Synchronicities appear not as miracles, but as natural expressions of harmony. You meet the right people at the right time. The opportunities you once chased begin to unfold on their own. You realize that the world was never withholding from you. It was waiting for you to stop resisting it. Something ancient in you awakens, a memory beyond words that existence has always been whole. You begin to see that the purpose of your confusion was never to be solved, but to humble you, to soften you, to open you wide enough to receive what intellect could never grasp. You start to live more gently. You listen more deeply. You speak less often, but with more truth. You become less interested in convincing and more interested in understanding. You see that every person you meet is also walking their own uncertain path, trying to find peace in the mystery, and that understanding breeds compassion. You stop demanding that people be perfect, because you've stopped demanding that of yourself. You stop measuring worth by success, because you've seen how empty success feels when it isn't aligned with being. You stop running from silence, because you've discovered that silence isn't empty, it's alive, like the pause between waves. From here, a new kind of freedom begins to take shape, not the loud freedom of rebellion, but the quiet freedom of alignment. You no longer need to resist life, because you finally realize that you are not separate from it. You no longer need to search for meaning, because you've become meaning itself, unfolding, breathing, existing, without needing a reason. You start to see that what you once called confusion was actually grace in disguise. It stripped away what was false so that the truth could be felt, not understood. It wasn't chaos. It was clarity taking a slower, more honest form. Now, every ordinary act becomes sacred. Washing a dish, watching the rain, sitting with someone in silence. You feel the same intelligence moving through all of it, not above or beyond life, but within it. You realize that enlightenment was never about escaping the world. It was about coming home to it, as it is. You may still wake up some mornings feeling uncertain, but that no longer frightens you. You've learned to recognize it as a sign that you're alive. because certainty is the end of curiosity, and curiosity is the pulse of existence itself. You begin to thank the very uncertainty you once cursed, because you see how it's guided every step of your journey, not through control, but through connection. It kept you awake, it kept you humble, it kept you human. And perhaps that's the most profound discovery of all, that being human was never a mistake to overcome, but the miracle you were meant to embody. When you stop knowing, you start living. When you stop trying to arrive, you begin to arrive everywhere. When you stop seeking the divine outside of life, you realize it's been hiding inside every moment you ignored. The truth you've been searching for isn't hidden in books or philosophies. It's in the way your breath moves when you finally stop rushing. It's in the warmth of a sunrise you almost missed. It's in the quiet ache that reminds you how deeply you can still feel. Not knowing what you're doing anymore was never the end. It was the invitation, the doorway, the call back to what's real. And maybe that's all awakening truly is, remembering what you already knew before the world taught you to forget. Because the moment you stop demanding that life makes sense, it suddenly does, not in logic, but in wonder. Not in certainty, but in peace. You smile, not because everything is perfect, but because it doesn't need to be. You're no longer waiting to begin. You already have. You know, there's a peculiar kind of exhaustion that settles into a person, and it has nothing to do with how much sleep you've had or how hard you've worked during the day. It's deeper than that. It's the exhaustion that comes from looking at your life, at all the things you do, all the things you're supposed to care about, and finding yourself asking that most dangerous of questions: what's the point of any of this? Now, this isn't a question that announces itself with trumpets. It doesn't arrive as a dramatic crisis, though sometimes it can. More often, it seeps in quietly, like water finding its way through the smallest cracks. You're going through your routine, doing what you've always done, and suddenly you notice that the meaning has leaked out of everything. The things that used to matter, the goals that used to pull you forward, they're still there, but they've become strangely weightless, hollow. You go through the motions because, well, what else would you do? But the felt sense of purpose, that vital energy that makes it all seem worthwhile, has simply evaporated. And here's what makes it so disorienting. You look around and everyone else seems to be managing just fine. They're excited about their projects, their relationships, their plans for the future. They talk about their goals with genuine enthusiasm, as if these things really matter, as if they've found some secret you somehow missed. And you wonder, am I broken? Have I seen through something I wasn't supposed to see through? Or have I simply fallen into some kind of depression, some chemical imbalance that's stolen my ability to care? The feeling often starts with the big things. You think about your career, and you realize you're climbing a ladder that doesn't actually lead anywhere you want to go. Or perhaps it does lead somewhere. But when you imagine arriving at that destination, you can't find any real satisfaction in the image. You'll have the title, the salary, the recognition, and then what? More of the same, just at a higher altitude. You see your colleagues who've made it to where you're heading, and they don't seem any more fulfilled than you are. They've just gotten better at hiding it. Or perhaps they've stopped asking the question altogether. Then it spreads to the smaller things, the daily activities that are supposed to add texture and meaning to life. Hobbies feel like elaborate distractions. Entertainment becomes a way to fill time rather than something genuinely enjoyable. Even relationships can start to feel like performances, roles you're playing, because that's what people do. You love your family, your friends, but there's this strange distance, as if you're watching yourself interact with them from somewhere far away, going through the appropriate emotional responses without really feeling them fully. And the future, the future becomes particularly problematic because our entire lives are organized around the future, aren't they? We're always working towards something, saving for something, preparing for something, But when everything feels pointless, the future collapses into an endless repetition of the same empty present. You'll wake up tomorrow, go through your routine, have your experiences, go to sleep, and then do it all again and again and again. For what? To survive so you can continue surviving? To be happy when happiness itself has started to feel like just another item on an impossible checklist? Now, when this feeling arrives, people typically respond in one of several ways, and none of them quite work.
Before we continue, many of you have been asking for something longer, something with actual practices you can use in daily life. So check out the 3-hour audiobook that takes everything we explore in these videos and gives you the tools to actually work with it. Because here's the thing, intellectual understanding without practical application just keeps you spinning in your head. You need both, the insight and the practice, the philosophy and the daily work that makes it real. This audiobook gives you that. 3 hours of deep wisdom with practices built in, so you're not just thinking differently, you're living differently. If you're serious about changing how you experience your life, the link is in the description below. Now, let's continue.
The first response is to try harder. You think, well, perhaps I just need to find the right goal, the right purpose. So you look around for something that might fill this void. Maybe it's a new career path, something more meaningful, more aligned with your values. Maybe it's a creative project, something that will express your authentic self. Maybe it's a relationship, a person who will make everything feel worthwhile again. Or perhaps it's a cause, something bigger than yourself that you can dedicate your energy to. And so you pursue these things with a kind of desperate intensity. You throw yourself into the new job, the new hobby, the new relationship. And for a while, it works. There's excitement, novelty, the feeling that, yes, this is it, I've found what was missing. But then, slowly or suddenly, that feeling fades. The new job becomes just another job. The creative project becomes another obligation. The relationship settles into routine. The cause reveals its limitations and contradictions. And you're back where you started, only now with the added burden of knowing that even when you find what you're looking for, it doesn't actually solve the problem. The second response is to try to think your way out of it. You read philosophy, psychology, self-help books. You're looking for the right perspective, the right framework that will make everything make sense again. And there's some value in this, certainly. Understanding can be helpful. But you notice something peculiar happens. You can understand intellectually that life has meaning. You can follow the arguments, agree with the conclusions, and yet the feeling of pointlessness remains untouched. It's as if there are two separate tracks running in you. One track knows all the right answers, can articulate why life matters, why your actions have significance. The other track, the one you actually live from, remains unconvinced, unmoved. Some people try to simply override the feeling. They commit to a philosophy or a belief system that tells them what matters, and they force themselves to care about those things. They create structure, discipline, routines. They tell themselves that meaning is something you create through commitment and action, not something you feel. And this can work for a time. You can function quite well, actually, by simply deciding that certain things matter and acting accordingly, regardless of how you feel about it. But there's an exhaustion in this approach, isn't there? A constant effort of will. And every now and then, in the quiet moments, the question returns, but why am I doing this? What's the point of forcing myself to care about things I don't actually care about? Then there's the root of distraction, which is perhaps the most common response of all. You keep yourself busy, entertained, stimulated. You fill every moment with activity, with media, with social interaction, with anything that keeps the question at bay. And modern life makes this remarkably easy. There's always something to watch, something to scroll through, something to occupy your attention. You can go days, weeks, even months, without ever sitting still long enough for the feeling to fully surface. But it's there, isn't it? Underneath everything. And the moments when it breaks through, those moments become increasingly uncomfortable, increasingly difficult to bear. Some people turn to pleasure, to sensation. They pursue experiences that make them feel alive, even temporarily. Adventure, romance, substances, risk. Anything that creates intensity, that cuts through the numbness. And there's a logic to this. If nothing matters, then at least you can feel something, anything. The problem is that pleasure has this diminishing return. What once thrilled you becomes ordinary. You need more intensity, more novelty, more stimulation to achieve the same effect. And eventually you realize you're running faster and faster just to stay in the same place, still feeling that underlying emptiness. And then there's the philosophical response, the one that says, well, if nothing matters, then I'm free. If there's no inherent meaning, no cosmic purpose, then I can do whatever I want. This is the existentialist position. And there's something appealing about it. It sounds liberating. But notice what actually happens when you try to live from this place. The freedom feels more like abandonment than liberation. Yes, you can do whatever you want, but what do you want? Without any felt sense of what matters, freedom becomes a kind of paralysis. Every option is equally meaningless, which means there's no real basis for choosing one thing over another. What makes this whole experience particularly isolating is that it's so difficult to talk about. When you try to explain it to someone, they often respond with solutions, with suggestions, with reassurance. Have you tried exercise, therapy? Maybe you need a vacation. Maybe you're depressed and should consider medication. And these might all be helpful things, genuinely. But they miss the point, don't they? Because what you're experiencing isn't a problem to be solved. It's more like a question that won't go away, a seeing that can't be unseen. Or people will try to inspire you. They'll remind you of all the good things in your life, all the reasons you have to be grateful, all the people who love you, all the opportunities available to you. And you know they're right. Objectively, logically, you know you have a good life, perhaps even a great life. But that knowledge doesn't touch the feeling. It's like someone describing a delicious meal to you when you've lost your sense of taste. Yes, I understand this is supposed to be good, but I can't actually taste it. Sometimes the feeling becomes so pervasive that you start to wonder if this is just what life is, and everyone else is simply better at pretending otherwise. Maybe all of human civilization is just an elaborate distraction from this fundamental emptiness. We create culture, art, science, religion, relationships, all these complex systems and structures, not because they're inherently meaningful, but because we need to give ourselves something to do, some way to avoid facing the void at the center of everything. And there's a particularly modern dimension to this experience. Because we live in a time of unprecedented material comfort and opportunity, at least for many of us. Our ancestors were too busy surviving to ask whether life had a point. The question of meaning was answered by necessity. You worked to eat, you had children to continue the family line, you participated in your community because you needed each other to survive. Purpose was built into the structure of life itself. But now, for many of us, survival is relatively secure. We have time, resources, options. We're told we can be anything, do anything, create our own meaning. And this freedom, this abundance of choice, it can actually make the question of pointlessness more acute. Because when you can do anything, the question becomes, yes, but what should I do? And who's to say? On what basis do you choose? What makes one path more meaningful than another when all paths are equally available and equally optional? You see this especially in the realm of work. Previous generations had roles, vocations, callings. You were a farmer, because your family were farmers. You were a craftsman because that's what your community needed. Your work was woven into a larger social fabric that gave it context and significance. But now, work is supposed to be a form of self-expression, a source of personal fulfillment. You're supposed to find your passion, follow your purpose, make a difference. And if you don't feel passionate, if you don't feel fulfilled, if you're not making a difference, well, that's a personal failure, isn't it? You failed to find the meaningful work that was supposedly there waiting for you. The same pattern appears in relationships. They're supposed to complete you, make you happy, give your life meaning. Your partner is supposed to be your soulmate, your best friend, your source of passion and comfort and growth all at once. And if your relationship doesn't provide all these things, if it feels more like comfortable companionship than cosmic significance, you wonder if you're missing something, if you're with the wrong person, if real love would feel different. Even leisure time becomes fraught. You're supposed to have hobbies that enrich you, experiences that broaden you, travels that transform you. Every moment is supposed to be optimized, meaningful, worthwhile. And so when you find yourself spending your free time just, sitting there, or scrolling mindlessly, or doing something that doesn't improve you or fulfill you, there's this nagging sense of waste, of failure, of life slipping through your fingers while you do nothing important with it. And underneath all of this, underneath all these attempts to find meaning or create meaning or convince yourself that meaning exists, there's a simpler, more fundamental question. The question isn't really, what's the point of this particular activity or that particular goal? The question is, what's the point of me? Why am I here? What is this strange fact of my existence for? I didn't choose to be born. I didn't ask for consciousness, for this awareness that can turn back on itself and question its own purpose. And yet here I am, thrown into existence, expected to figure out what to do with it, expected to care about it, expected to find it meaningful. When you really sit with this, when you let yourself feel the full weight of it, there's a kind of vertigo, because you realize that you are this temporary, fragile, utterly contingent thing. You appeared out of nothing, you return to nothing, and in between, you're supposed to somehow make it all matter. You're supposed to care deeply about things that, in the grand scheme of the universe, don't register at all. The universe doesn't care if you're happy or sad, successful or unsuccessful, if you fulfill your potential or waste your life. It simply doesn't care. It's indifferent. And you're just a brief ripple in an incomprehensibly vast process that was unfolding long before you arrived and will continue long after you're gone. Now, you might think this recognition would make things worse, and often it does, at first, because it seems to confirm the feeling of pointlessness. If nothing matters in any ultimate sense, if the universe is indifferent, if we're all just temporary patterns of matter and energy that will eventually dissipate, then what's the point of anything? Why not just give up? Why not just surrender to the meaninglessness of it all? But here's where something interesting happens if you stay with it long enough, because there's something else underneath the pointlessness, underneath the exhaustion and the emptiness and the endless questioning. There's a deeper current that you can only feel when you stop trying so hard to find meaning or create meaning or prove that meaning exists. And that's what we need to look at. Not as another solution, not as another answer to the question of pointlessness, but as a different way of being with the question itself. So let me ask you something, and I want you to really consider it. When you say everything feels pointless, what is it that's doing the feeling? Who is it that's noticing the pointlessness? There's something here, isn't there? Something present, something aware. And that something, that awareness, it doesn't feel pointless. The awareness itself, the consciousness that's watching all of this, questioning all of this, it's not empty. It's actually quite full, quite alive, quite present. You see, we've gotten ourselves into a very peculiar bind. We've confused the meaning of our lives with the meaning of our thoughts about our lives. We think that life feels pointless because we can't think of a point to it. But life isn't something you think. Life is something you are. And the being of life, the actual living presence of existence, it doesn't require a point. It doesn't need justification. It doesn't need to prove its worth. It simply is. And the isness of it, the sheer fact of being alive and aware, that's not pointless. That's not empty. That's the most fundamental fullness there is. Now, I know this might sound like semantic games, like I'm just playing with words. But stay with me, because something important is happening here. When you look for the point of life, you're looking in the wrong direction. You're looking forward into the future, towards some goal or purpose or destination that will make everything worthwhile. But life isn't happening in the future. Life is happening now. This moment, this breath, this sensation of being present and aware, this is life. Not the story about life, not the meaning of life, but life itself. And when you really pay attention to life itself, when you stop for a moment asking what it's for and simply notice what it is, something shifts. Because life, the actual immediate experience of being alive, it's extraordinary. Not because it's always pleasant or comfortable or fulfilling, but because it's here at all. The fact that there is something rather than nothing, the fact that you exist to experience anything whatsoever, this is, when you think about it, completely miraculous. You see, the question of pointlessness arises from a very specific assumption, an assumption we rarely examine. The assumption is that things need to have a point, that existence requires justification, that being alive is only worthwhile if it's for something. But where did this assumption come from? Who told you that your life needs a purpose beyond itself? Who said that the experience of existing isn't enough, that it needs to lead somewhere, accomplish something, mean something beyond what it already is? This is what I call the trap of instrumentality. We've learned to see everything as a means to an end. You go to school so you can get a job. You get a job so you can make money. You make money so you can be secure. You're secure so you can be happy. You're happy so you can, well, what? Live a meaningful life? And what's a meaningful life? One that has a point. And what's the point? To be happy. And around we go, each thing justified by the next thing, but never arriving at anything that's valuable in itself. But life itself, the actual living of it, isn't an instrument. It's not a means to something else. It's the thing itself. When you eat a delicious meal, you don't eat it in order to be full. Being full is part of the experience, certainly. But the point of eating isn't to arrive at fullness and then be done with it. The point of eating, if we must use that word, is the eating, the tasting, the savoring, the actual experience of it. And life is like this. The point of life isn't to arrive at some future state where you can finally say, now it all makes sense. Now it's been worthwhile. The point of life, if there is one, is the living of it, right here, right now. You know what happens when you listen to music? You don't listen to a symphony in order to reach the final note. The final note isn't the point. If it were, the best music would be the shortest music. Just play that last note and be done with it. But that's absurd, isn't it? The point of music is the music itself, the unfolding of sound in time, the experience of listening moment by moment. And life is like this too. It's not going anywhere. There's no destination you're trying to reach where you can finally rest and say, there, I've successfully lived. Life is what's happening along the way, in the supposed in-between times that we think don't count. Now, I can almost hear the objection forming. You're thinking, yes, but that's all well and good for moments of pleasure or beauty or comfort. But what about the rest of it? What about the suffering, the boredom, the pain, the endless, tedious, grinding through days that feel empty and exhausting? Are you telling me those have a point simply because they're happening? That seems like a rather cruel joke. And you're right to push back on that. because I'm not suggesting that suffering is good or that you should simply accept everything that happens as equally wonderful. But I am suggesting something else. I'm suggesting that the feeling of pointlessness, the exhaustion, the sense that nothing matters, this isn't actually caused by your circumstances. It's caused by the way you're relating to your circumstances, by the constant background assumption that life should be different than it is, that you should be different than you are, that there's somewhere else you're supposed to be, or something else you're supposed to be doing. Think about what happens when you're deeply engaged in something. Not forcing yourself to be engaged, not trying to care, but genuinely absorbed. Maybe you're having a conversation that fascinates you, or you're working on a problem that captures your full attention, or you're watching a sunset, or playing with a child, or reading something that speaks to you. In those moments, do you stop and ask, but what's the point of this? No, you don't, because the question doesn't arise. The experience itself is sufficient. It doesn't need justification because you're not separate from it, analyzing it, judging it. You're simply in it, part of it, flowing with it. The feeling of pointlessness, then, isn't about your life lacking meaning. It's about you standing outside your life, observing it, judging it, constantly evaluating whether it measures up to some imagined standard of what life should be. And from that position, of course, everything feels empty, because you've split yourself in two. There's the life that's happening, and then there's you, the observer, standing apart from it, asking if it's good enough, meaningful enough, worthwhile enough. And that observer, that judge, it's never satisfied, because satisfaction isn't its function. Its function is to evaluate, to compare, to find lacking. But who is this observer? Who is this judge that stands apart from life evaluating it? When you look closely, when you really try to find this separate self that's supposedly outside looking in, you can't find it. There's just experience happening, awareness of experience happening, but no separate entity apart from it all. The observer is itself part of the observed. The thinker of thoughts is just another thought. The self that seems to stand outside your life, questioning its meaning, is itself part of the life it's questioning. And this is where everything inverts. Because the search for meaning, the need to find a point to it all, this is itself the problem. Not because meaning doesn't exist, but because you're looking for it in the wrong way. You're looking for it as if meaning is something separate from experience, something that could be added to life to make it worthwhile. But meaning isn't separate from experience. Meaning is the texture of experience itself when you're fully present to it, when you're not busy evaluating it or wishing it were different. Let me put it another way. When you ask, what's the point? You're really asking, why should I care about this? And underneath that question is an assumption that you're separate from this, that you're a subject confronted with an object world that may or may not be worth your investment. But the actual truth of your experience, when you look at it directly, is that there's no such separation. You are not in the world encountering experiences that may or may not be meaningful. You are the world experiencing itself, knowing itself in this particular form, in this particular moment. The pointlessness you feel then is the exhaustion of maintaining this fiction of separation. It's tiring, isn't it? This constant evaluation, this endless questioning, this need to justify your existence. And the exhaustion itself is a kind of signal, a message from your deeper intelligence saying, stop, this isn't working, there's another way. What's the other way? It's the way of participation rather than observation. Instead of standing apart from your life asking what it means, you become your life, fully, completely. Not by forcing yourself to care about things you don't care about, but by dropping the question of whether you should care and simply allowing yourself to be present to what is. And here's the paradox. When you stop looking for meaning, when you stop demanding that life justify itself to you, meaning appears, not as something added to experience, but as the natural flavor of experience when you're not constantly filtering it through judgment and evaluation. A conversation becomes meaningful not because it's leading somewhere or accomplishing something, but because you're actually having it, actually listening, actually present. Work becomes meaningful not because it's fulfilling some grand purpose, but because you're actually doing it, bringing your full attention to it, engaging with it as it is, rather than as you think it should be. This is what the old Zen masters meant when they said that before enlightenment you chop wood and carry water, and after enlightenment you chop wood and carry water. The actions are the same, but the relationship to them is completely different. You're no longer standing outside your life wishing it were different, waiting for the meaningful part to begin. You're in your life as your life, and the question of meaning or pointlessness simply doesn't arise in the same way. Now, this doesn't mean that everything suddenly becomes wonderful, or that you're happy all the time, or that you stop wanting things to change. You'll still have preferences, still work toward goals, still hope for certain outcomes rather than others. But it's all much lighter, much less burdened, because you're not freighting every moment with this impossible demand that it justify your existence. You can want things without needing them to make your life meaningful. You can work toward goals without needing to achieve them to prove you're worthwhile. You can fail, struggle, suffer even, without it meaning that your life is pointless. Because here's what we've forgotten. Life doesn't need a point. That's not a depressing realization. It's actually deeply liberating. Because if life doesn't need a point, then you are free. Free from the crushing burden of having to make your life mean something. Free from the constant anxiety that you're not doing enough, not being enough, not living right. Free to simply be here, alive, aware, experiencing whatever is arising in this moment without needing it to be anything more than what it is. And in that freedom, something wonderful happens. The world becomes interesting again. Not because you've found the answer to the question of meaning, but because you've stopped asking the question in that desperate, grasping way. You start to notice things again. The quality of light in the morning, the taste of your coffee, the feeling of breath moving in your body, the strange miracle of being able to think thoughts and form words and communicate with other beings who are also somehow alive and aware. None of this needs to be for anything. It's enough that it is. You see, the universe, this whole vast unfolding process, it's not going anywhere. There's no destination it's trying to reach, no purpose it's trying to fulfill. It's simply playing itself out, moment by moment, in an infinite variety of forms. And you are one of those forms. You're what the universe is doing right here, right now, in this particular location. You're not in the universe having an experience. You are the universe having an experience of itself. And from this perspective, the question, what's the point, is like a wave asking, what's the point of being a wave? The wave isn't separate from the ocean, trying to justify its existence. The wave is what the ocean is doing in that moment. It arises, it moves, it falls, and then the water that formed the wave becomes part of the next wave. Nothing is lost. Nothing is wasted. Nothing needs to be for anything other than what it is. This is what the mystics have always tried to point to. Not a belief system you need to adopt, not a philosophy you need to follow, but a direct recognition of what you actually are underneath all the concepts and stories and judgments. You are not a separate self trying to find meaning in a meaningless universe. You are the universe meaning itself, knowing itself, experiencing itself in this particular form. And when that recognition really lands, not as an idea, but as a felt sense, everything changes and nothing changes. You still have your life, your responsibilities, your struggles and joys and mundane routines, but you're not carrying them in the same way. There's a lightness, a playfulness even, because you're not taking yourself quite so seriously anymore. You see, through the game of self, the story of me trying to make my life meaningful, trying to justify my existence, you realize you don't need to justify your existence. Your existence justifies itself simply by being. So what do you do with this? How do you live from this recognition? Well, you don't really do anything with it, because it's not a technique or a practice or a method. It's more like a remembering, a coming back to something you've always known but forgotten. And the forgetting is natural, part of the game. You'll forget and remember, probably for the rest of your life. But each time you remember, it gets a little easier, a little more familiar. And in the meantime, you just live. You do what needs doing, what calls to you, what appears in front of you. Not because it's meaningful, not because it's the right thing to do, not because it will make your life worthwhile, but simply because you're alive. And this is what being alive looks like. Sometimes it looks like work, sometimes like play, sometimes like suffering, sometimes like joy. All of it is life. All of it is the universe exploring itself through your form. The feeling of pointlessness, then, isn't your enemy. It's not a problem to be solved or a state to escape from. It's an invitation, a doorway, a call to wake up from the dream of separation, the exhausting fiction that you're a separate self trying to make a separate life meaningful. When everything feels pointless, that's life saying, stop trying so hard. Stop demanding that I be something I'm not. Just be here. Just be present. Just let yourself live without needing it to mean anything more than what it is. And that's enough. In fact, it's everything. Not because it's profound or spiritual or enlightened, but because it's actual. It's real. It's what's here when you stop looking somewhere else for something else that will finally make everything worthwhile. The whole search for meaning was a distraction from the only thing that's ever been real, which is this, right here, right now. Your life, exactly as it is, in all its ordinariness and extraordinariness, its beauty and its plainness, its joy and its sorrow. All of it, the whole catastrophe, as Zorba called it. Not meaningful or meaningless, but simply, wonderfully, mysteriously alive.
You see, there are no accidents in this universe. The fact that you've stumbled upon these words, that somehow this moment has drawn your attention here, is not random at all. It's an orchestration, an unfolding of something you've been quietly calling forth, even if you weren't entirely aware of it. Life, after all, has a rather mysterious way of answering your deepest desires long before you've learned how to properly ask for them. Now, I want you to slow down. Just breathe. Because what I'm about to say is not meant to excite the surface of your mind, but to awaken something much deeper, that quiet intelligence inside you that already knows. The energy that brought you here has been waiting patiently for you to remember who you are. And once you truly remember, once you step back into the awareness that creates worlds, you'll see that manifestation isn't about trying to get something. It's about realizing that you already are everything. But let's begin from where most of us start, the sense of lack. You want something, don't you? Maybe it's love. Maybe it's abundance. Maybe it's freedom from worry, from debt, from loneliness, from the endless striving that never seems to end. And so, you search. You read books, watch videos, practice affirmations, visualize, pray, meditate, and yet sometimes it still feels distant. Like the universe is taking its sweet time. But here's the great paradox. The universe doesn't delay. It responds instantly to your state of being. The reason it appears slow is because we are the ones resisting the natural flow. We are so accustomed to living as seekers, running towards something we believe we don't have, that we forget the most vital truth of creation. You cannot manifest what you want. You can only manifest what you are. This is the first secret. It is not your thoughts that manifest. It is your state. The moment you begin to feel the fullness of what you seek, even before it arrives, you create the energetic condition for it to appear. This is not a belief. It's a law, a universal rhythm that is as certain as gravity. You see, manifestation doesn't begin with effort. It begins with alignment. The trouble is, most people are taught to chase after what they desire as if they were separate from it. They say, when I finally get this job, this person, this house, I'll feel happy, secure, and free. But in that very thought lies the seed of resistance. Because when you postpone your state of joy, you declare energetically that you don't have it now. And that's the vibration the universe mirrors back to you. The trick, if you can call it that, is to reverse the process. You don't manifest because you receive because you've already manifested it within. Now, let's take a moment to imagine something. Imagine you are standing at the shore of the ocean. The water moves toward you, then pulls away. In a never-ending dance. You don't command the tide, you align with it. You observe it. You let it carry you if you wish to swim. That's how creation works. You don't demand the ocean to bring you a wave. You merge with its rhythm, and it naturally delivers you exactly where you need to be. In the same way, manifestation happens not through control, but through synchronization. When your thoughts, emotions, and awareness move in harmony, when you are at peace, you begin to flow with the current of reality instead of thrashing against it. So, if you found this, it means your energy is already shifting. Something in you is waking up a recognition that life doesn't happen to you. It happens through you. Let's explore this more deeply. You've been conditioned since childhood to think of yourself as a person in the world, a body, a mind, a personality with goals, habits, and a name. But the truth is far grander. You are not in the universe is in you. You are the awareness within which all experience arises. Every sound, every thought, every sensation, even this very moment of listening, is happening inside your consciousness. You are the space in which reality dances. And once you truly know this, not intellectually, but experientially, your ability to manifest becomes effortless. Because how can the infinite consciousness that creates worlds ever lack something? When you feel separate from life, you fall into the illusion of wanting. But when you realize that you and life are one continuous movement, desire transforms into expression. You no longer chase after things. You allow them to unfold as natural extensions of who you are. Think of a flower. It doesn't strain to bloom. It simply responds to the sun, to the soil, to the rhythm of the seasons. Its becoming is inevitable. And so is yours. If you've been struggling to manifest something, it's not because you're doing it wrong. It's because you're still trying. The universe does not respond to trying. It responds to being. There is a subtle difference between wanting something and being the vibration of it. Wanting implies distance. Being implies union. And the moment you enter that union, the instant you feel, deeply and vividly, that your desire is already real, you collapse the distance between you and it. This is the physics of consciousness. Every thought emits a frequency. Every emotion amplifies it. And every belief shapes the way that frequency interacts with the field of infinite possibilities. But here's the beauty. You don't need to know how it will happen. The how belongs to the universe. Your job is to feel it now, as if it were already done. So pause just for a moment, and close your eyes if you wish. Imagine the very thing you desire most. See it, sense it, breathe it in, and now let go of it completely. Yes, let it go. Because clinging to the image keeps you bound to its absence. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means trusting that the intelligence that made galaxies can certainly handle your dream. When you release it into the field, when you surrender, you open the space for it to come rushing toward you. And often, it arrives in ways you never could have planned. But you must be open. You must stop measuring time. The universe doesn't work on human clocks. It operates in divine timing, a timing that only becomes visible when you step out of impatience and into presence. Presence is the fertile soil of manifestation. When you are present, truly here, the mind quiets, the noise of doubt softens, the heart expands, and from that silence, creation moves swiftly. You see, you are not manifesting through force. You are manifesting through coherence. The more aligned your inner world is, the more your thoughts and emotions move in harmony, the faster reality bends to reflect it. This is why sometimes things take so long. Not because the universe is withholding, but because we are broadcasting mixed signals. One day we say, I am abundant, and the next we feel scarcity. One moment we affirm, I am loved, and the next we doubt our worth. The field responds faithfully to whatever energy you hold most consistently. So when you found this message in the endless ocean of content, it wasn't chance. It was resonance. Something in your frequency matched these words, and that's the universe's way of saying, you're ready. Ready to stop waiting. Ready to stop doubting. Ready to stop asking when, and start living as if it's already here. Because manifestation happens at the speed of belief. The moment your inner world matches the vibration of what you want, the external world has no choice but to rearrange itself. That's not philosophy, it's physics. But remember, belief isn't forced. It's not something you shout at the universe with affirmations you don't truly feel. Belief arises naturally when you quiet the noise of resistance. When you stop trying to believe and instead remember that you are the dreamer. You see, this entire universe is a kind of magnificent dream, an infinite play of consciousness, pretending to be many forms. And within this dream, you have the extraordinary ability to shape your experience, but only when you stop identifying as the dream character and awaken as the dreamer. That's what this message is really about. It's not just about getting things, though. That will happen too. It's about awakening to the effortless power of who you truly are. So, if you found this video, consider it your invitation to remember, to pause your striving and simply be, to look around at your life not as a series of random events, but as a mirror reflecting your innermost state of consciousness. Every delay, every disappointment, every unanswered prayer was never punishment. It was preparation, a sacred way of clearing what needed to be released so that you could become a clear channel for what you truly desire. You see, manifestation isn't about forcing your will upon the world. It's about tuning your inner instrument so that you can play in harmony with existence. When your frequency matches that of love, peace, and gratitude, the universe cannot help but respond in kind. So don't ignore this moment. Don't dismiss this as coincidence. You are hearing this because you've reached the point where your old identity, the one rooted in fear, doubt, and effort, is dissolving. A new version of you is emerging. One that doesn't chase, but attracts. One that doesn't pray from desperation, but from knowing. One that doesn't seek signs because you are the sign. The sign that you are ready. And the universe has been waiting for this alignment, this very moment, to bring your desires to life faster than ever before. So relax. Stop trying so hard. What you want is already in motion. All you must do is allow it. You know, we often think that manifestation is about doing something as if we could manipulate the universe by sheer effort. But manifestation isn't an act of doing, it's an art of allowing. It's the ability to become still enough so that what already exists in potential can flow into form. When you want something deeply, there is a natural tendency to tense up, to focus, to plan, to push. Yet all of that effort subtly declares, I don't have it yet. And the universe, being an obedient mirror, reflects that statement perfectly. You continue to experience the vibration of not having. But consider this, when you drop the tension, when you exhale and trust the rhythm of life, everything you've been asking for begins to gravitate toward you, as if drawn by invisible threads. It's like floating on your back in a river. The current knows where to take you, but you must stop thrashing first. You see, when you found this message, something in your soul was already whispering, let go. Not in the sense of giving up, but in the sense of releasing your grip on control. Control is the great illusion. It's what the ego loves most to plan, to force, to measure. But life, my dear friend, is far too vast to be managed. The more you try to control it, the more it slips through your fingers like water. The secret, then, is to become like water, yourself fluid, trusting, responsive. The great Taoist sages understood this. They said that the highest virtue is to flow with the Tao of the way. And manifestation, when properly understood, is not separate from that ancient wisdom. To manifest is simply to cooperate with the way. But cooperation doesn't mean passivity. It means alignment. It means listening, sensing, and responding from a place of inner stillness. You cannot hear the subtle guidance of the universe when your mind is noisy. You cannot feel the gentle nudge of intuition when you're busy asking, when will it come? Why hasn't it come yet? Those questions come from lack, not from knowing. So the real practice is not in thinking about what you want, but in entering the emotional frequency of already having it. Let's try something again. Bring to mind your desire, the one that feels closest to your heart. Maybe it's love, maybe it's abundance, maybe it's healing. Now, rather than seeing it as something out there, imagine it as a feeling within you. What does it feel like to have it? What emotions would fill your being if it were already done? Feel that warmth spreading through your chest, that quiet relief, that soft gratitude. Stay with it for a moment. That is the signal. That is the vibration. And when you sustain that vibration not as a performance, but as a natural state, the universe must respond, because it is you. There is no outside. This is the part that most people miss. You are not sending out a wish to a distant power. You are harmonizing with the infinite consciousness that is breathing your body, spinning the planets, and unfolding galaxies. And when your inner state matches the frequency of that divine rhythm, everything begins to unfold with astonishing speed. Synchronicities appear. Opportunities find you. People come into your life as if drawn by destiny. But destiny, you see, is simply the natural consequence of alignment. There are no coincidences, only convergences. You are converging with the very energy you've been asking for. And that's why you're hearing this now. Because manifestation begins in awareness. It begins the moment you remember that you and the universe are one continuous organism, dreaming itself into form. It's a dream that responds instantly to the dreamer. But we've been taught to doubt that. We've been taught that life is outside of us, that we must work hard, earn, struggle, fight. Yet what if you realize that the universe is not testing you, but dancing with you? That everything you call delay is simply the universe adjusting its rhythm to match your readiness. This is why things sometimes seem slow. The delay is not denial, it's calibration. The universe is waiting for you to catch up vibrationally to what you've asked for. And the fastest way to catch up is through gratitude. Not the kind of gratitude that you force out of obligation, but the genuine, spontaneous gratitude that arises when you realize that life is already complete. Gratitude dissolves resistance. It bridges the gap between wanting and having. When you are truly grateful, not because of what's coming, but because of what is your entire energetic field shifts instantly. You begin to emit a frequency of enoughness, and reality rushes to reflect that. This is why miracles often happen when people stop trying. It's not because they stop caring. It's because they finally relaxed into trust. They stop standing in the way of their own blessings. So, if you want to manifest something fast, don't chase it. Don't beg for it. Don't question it. Sit in silence and feel it as if it were already yours. Let the emotion of fulfillment fill your body, as though you were watching the final scene of your own movie, knowing that it all worked out perfectly. That feeling that peace is the portal. And once you step into that portal, reality begins to rearrange itself to accommodate your inner knowing. Because energy follows awareness. Always. If your awareness is locked on fear, you feed fear. If it's anchored in gratitude, you amplify abundance. It's that simple. But simplicity is not always easy, because the mind wants to interfere. It wants to analyze, compare, calculate. It whispers, what if it doesn't work? What if I'm not good enough? And so the practice becomes one of quieting that voice, not by fighting it, but by observing it. Notice that voice in your head for what it is, a thought, a ripple on the surface of your consciousness. You don't have to believe it, you don't have to resist it, just watch it. Because the moment you watch the mind, instead of being entangled by it, you rise above it. And from that space of awareness, you become the master of energy. You can redirect your attention to where it truly matters. The feeling of wholeness, the vibration of already having. That's the entire secret of rapid manifestation. Awareness without resistance. You are not becoming powerful. You're remembering that you always were. Let this sink in deeply. The universe is not outside you. It's an extension of your own consciousness. So when you shift your state, the universe cannot help but shift with you. This is why sometimes when people awaken to this truth, their lives transform in what appears to be miraculous ways. They stop worrying about the how and begin to live from the now. And the how takes care of itself. Everything is energy. Everything vibrates. And your vibration, your emotional state, determines which version of reality you experience. So the question is not, how do I get what I want? The question is, what am I being right now? Because whatever you're being, you're broadcasting. And the field, this great, intelligent, responsive field, echoes that signal back to you. When you emit joy, life mirrors joy. When you radiate peace, life becomes peaceful. When you embody love, the universe rushes to show you how loved you truly are. It's not magic, it's resonance. That's why this message came to you now, because your frequency is moving toward coherence, toward alignment with what you've been asking for. So I tell you now, gently but firmly, do not ignore this moment. Don't rush past it. Don't think maybe I'll practice this later. This is the practice. This is the doorway. Right here, in your awareness, lies the power to shape worlds. You don't need another technique. You don't need to prove your worth. You simply need to be still enough to feel the vibration of what's already unfolding, because it's coming, faster than you think. Every time you choose gratitude over fear, it comes closer. Every time you trust instead of worry, it accelerates. Every time you act from love instead of lack, you move into the timeline where it already exists. The field rearranges itself in response to your state, always. So stop searching for signs and start being the sign. Stop waiting for permission and start embodying the permission. The moment you feel it fully, even once the quantum field takes a snapshot of that vibration and begins constructing the reality that matches it. That is how it works. That is how fast it can happen. And sometimes the only thing standing between you and that shift is one breath. So breathe. Inhale deeply. Exhale slowly. Let your shoulders drop. Let the tension melt away. Now say to yourself, silently or aloud, I am ready to receive. Feel what that means. Feel how your body softens when you stop forcing and start allowing. That is the moment manifestation begins. It begins not with words, not with vision boards, but with the relaxation of resistance, the surrender of control, and the trust that the universe knows the way. Because it does. It always has. The energy that made stars, that formed oceans, that breathed life into you, it's the same energy that fulfills desires. You are not separate from it. You are it. And so, whatever you are asking for, whatever has been stirring in your heart, it's already done. All you must do is align your awareness to that truth. So if you found this today, let it be your reminder, your turning point. The quiet nudge from the infinite saying, stop waiting, start being. Let this be the moment you step into trust. Let this be the moment you let go of control. Let this be the moment you remember that you are the universe expressing itself. And the universe never struggles to create. So don't ignore this message. You were guided here for a reason. And if you can hold this vibration, even for a few minutes a day, the vibration of gratitude, peace, and completeness, you will see the outer world shift so quickly that it will feel almost impossible to explain. But you won't need to explain it. You'll simply smile, knowing that it was never magic. It was you, all along. The dreamer awakening inside the dream. So walk now with calm confidence. Trust that everything you've asked for is already on its way, or perhaps, more accurately, it's already here, waiting for you to notice. Because when you finally stop chasing, you start a... I've been asked countless times by people who've had what they call a spiritual awakening, why do I feel so unmotivated? Why does nothing seem to matter anymore? I used to be ambitious. I used to want things. I used to have goals and dreams, and now nothing. And they say this with a kind of concern, as if something has gone terribly wrong. As if the awakening itself was a mistake, a cosmic error that needs to be corrected. But let me tell you something that might surprise you. What you're experiencing isn't a problem at all. It's actually the most natural thing in the world. You see, what we call motivation in the ordinary sense is really just a sophisticated form of running away. It's escape. When you were motivated before, what were you really motivated by? Fear. Fear of not being enough. Fear of death. fear of meaninglessness, fear of being nobody, going nowhere, amounting to nothing. Think about it carefully. All that striving, all that ambition, all those goals you set for yourself, they were all based on a fundamental assumption. The assumption that you were insufficient as you are, that you needed to become something other than what you are, that life needed to be fixed, improved, gotten somewhere with. You were operating under the illusion that you were a separate individual who needed to make their mark on the world, who needed to justify their existence, who needed to prove their worth. But then something happened. You woke up, and in that awakening, you saw through the game. You realized, perhaps suddenly, or perhaps gradually, that the whole thing was a magnificent hoax. Not a malicious hoax, mind you, but a cosmic game of hide and seek. You discovered that you are not, in fact, a separate fragment of consciousness locked inside a bag of skin, desperately trying to survive in a hostile universe. You realize that you are the universe itself, playing at being you. Now, when this realization dawns, even partially, what happens to all those motivations you had before? They collapse. They have to collapse because they were built on sand. They were built on a false premise, the premise of separation, of lack, of incompleteness. And once you see that the premise is false, the entire structure that was built upon it becomes, well, rather absurd, doesn't it? Imagine you're watching a movie and you're completely absorbed in it. The hero is in danger and you're on the edge of your seat, heart pounding, palms sweating. You're motivated to see him escape, to see him triumph. But then someone turns on the lights and you suddenly remember, oh yes, it's just a movie. It's just actors on a screen. Nobody is actually in danger. Now, can you return to that same level of motivation? Can you care as intensely as you did before? Of course not. You've seen through it. This is what has happened to you. You've had the lights turned on, so to speak, and now you're sitting there wondering why you can't get back into the movie. Why you can't summon the same intensity of concern and ambition you once had. And my question to you is, why would you want to? You see, there's a common misunderstanding about spiritual awakening. People think it's supposed to make you into some kind of super person, more successful, more motivated, more capable. They think enlightenment means you'll be better at the game of life. But that's not what awakening is about at all. Awakening means seeing that life isn't a game you need to win. It's a dance you're invited to participate in, or not, as you choose. Let me put it another way. Before awakening, you were like someone who believed they needed to make waves in the ocean. You were splashing about frantically, trying to create the biggest splash, trying to make your mark on the water. But after awakening, you realize you are the ocean. The waves are already happening. They don't need your anxiety to propel them forward. They move by themselves, naturally, effortlessly. This is what the Taoists call Wu Wei, action without action, or effortless doing. It's not that you become passive or lazy. Rather, you stop forcing things. You stop pushing the river. You allow life to flow through you rather than constantly trying to manipulate it to your advantage. Now, here's where it gets interesting. You see, motivation, as we commonly understand it, is tied up with desire. And desire is tied up with the feeling of lack. You desire what you don't have. You're motivated to pursue what you believe will complete you, fulfill you, make you whole. But awakening reveals that you're already whole. You're already complete. There's nothing lacking, nothing that needs to be added to you to make you acceptable or worthwhile. This realization can be profoundly destabilizing, because your entire life up until this point has been organized around the pursuit of fulfillment. Your career, your relationships, your hobbies, your ambitions, all of it was geared toward filling what you perceived as a fundamental emptiness inside yourself. And now, suddenly, you realize there is no emptiness to fill. Or rather, the emptiness itself is fullness. The void is plenum. So naturally, you feel unmotivated. All your previous motivations were attempts to escape from yourself, to become something other than what you are. But now that you've glimpsed your true nature, that particular game loses its appeal. It's like trying to convince someone who's discovered they're already a millionaire to keep working desperately for pennies. Why would they? What would be the point? But, and this is crucial, this doesn't mean you do nothing. It doesn't mean you lie in bed all day staring at the ceiling. What it means is that your actions are no longer driven by fear and lack. They arise spontaneously, naturally, from your being, rather than from your desperate doing. Think of a tree. Is a tree motivated to grow? Does it have goals and ambitions? Does it wake up in the morning and set intentions for how many leaves it's going to produce that day? Of course not. It simply grows. It's its nature to grow. And in the same way, when you're no longer blocked by the false sense of being a separate ego that needs to constantly justify its existence, you simply do what's natural to you. Not because you should, not because it will get you somewhere, but because it's an expression of what you are. This is the great paradox that so many people stumble over. They awaken and expect to feel more motivated than ever, more clear about their purpose, more driven to achieve great things. Instead, they feel empty, directionless, unmotivated, and they panic, thinking something has gone wrong, but nothing has gone wrong. What's happened is that the false motivation, the fear-based, ego-driven motivation has been revealed for what it is. And in its absence, there's a space, a silence, a stillness. Most people find this silence terrifying. They immediately try to fill it up again with new goals, new ambitions, new spiritual pursuits. They turn awakening itself into another achievement to pursue, another identity to construct. Now, I'm not just John or Jane, I'm awakened John, enlightened Jane, but this is just the ego wearing different clothes. It's still the same game of separation and striving, just dressed up in spiritual language. The real question is, can you tolerate the emptiness? Can you sit with the lack of motivation without trying to fix it, without trying to generate artificial enthusiasm for things that no longer genuinely interest you? Can you be nobody going nowhere and be completely at peace with that? This is where the real work begins. And I use the word work loosely because it's not work in the usual sense. It's more like allowing yourself to be without purpose, allowing yourself to exist without justification, allowing life to move through you without your constant interference and management. You see, what most people don't realize is that the universe is not static. It's not a dead thing that needs to be pushed and prodded into action. It's alive, dynamic, constantly creating itself. And you are not separate from this creative process. You are this creative process. When you stop trying to control everything, when you stop forcing your personal will onto reality, something remarkable happens. The larger intelligence of life itself begins to express through you. But this requires trust. Enormous trust. You have to trust that life knows what it's doing, that the universe is not going to let you fall through the cracks just because you're not micromanaging every detail of your existence. This is perhaps the hardest thing for the Western mind to accept, because we've been trained from birth to believe that we have to make things happen, that nothing will get done unless we personally see to it. Eastern philosophy has a different perspective. In Taoism, there's this wonderful idea that the universe is self-governing, that it operates by spontaneous harmony without any need for central control or planning. A tree doesn't need a supervisor to tell it how to grow. A bird doesn't need a manual on how to build a nest. And in the same way, you don't need your anxious ego to tell you how to live. Life already knows how to live itself through you. Now, I can hear the objection already, but Alan, if I don't motivate myself, I'll just become lazy. I'll accomplish nothing. I'll waste my life. This objection comes from the assumption that human beings are fundamentally lazy and need to be whipped into action. But is this really true? Look at children before they're conditioned by society. Are they unmotivated? On the contrary, they're bursting with energy and curiosity. They don't need to be motivated to play, to explore, to create. It's their nature. What happens is that this natural spontaneity gets crushed by education, by socialization, by the constant message that you need to be productive, useful, successful, you need to prove your worth. You need to earn your place in the world. And so you develop this artificial motivation system, this internal slave driver that's constantly pushing you, criticizing you, never allowing you to simply be. Spiritual awakening dismantles this internal slave driver. And yes, when it goes, you feel unmotivated, but only unmotivated to participate in that particular game of self-torture. What emerges in its place, if you're patient, is something much more natural and authentic. Not the frantic energy of someone running away from their fear of death and meaninglessness, but the calm, steady energy of someone who's at home in themselves, who's at peace with existence. Let me share something with you. When I was younger, I was tremendously ambitious. I wanted to make a name for myself, to be recognized, to be somebody important. I threw myself into my studies, into my work, into my writing, and there was a certain energy to it, yes, but it was the energy of desperation. I was running, trying to outpace my own sense of inadequacy. Then, through my study of Eastern philosophy and my own inner work, something shifted. The urgency fell away. And for a time, I felt exactly what you're feeling now, unmotivated, directionless, wondering what the point was. But I sat with it. I didn't try to fix it or escape from it. And gradually, I discovered that actions still happened. Words still came. Work still got done. But it wasn't coming from that desperate, anxious place anymore. It was coming from, well, it's hard to describe. From silence, perhaps. From emptiness. From the simple joy of doing the thing for its own sake, not for what it might achieve. This is what the Zen masters mean when they talk about chopping wood, carrying water. Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. The actions look the same from the outside, but the internal quality is completely different. Before awakening, you chop wood because you should, because it needs to be done, because you're trying to be a good person or achieve some goal. After awakening, you chop wood because you're chopping wood. That's all. No hidden agenda, no ulterior motive, just the pure act itself. And here's the beautiful thing. When you act from this place of spontaneous naturalness rather than forced motivation, your actions tend to be much more effective. They're not confused by all the psychological baggage, all the fear and desire and anxiety. They're clean, direct, appropriate to the situation. It's like the difference between muddy water and clear water. Both are water, but one allows you to see clearly, and the other doesn't. So what do you do with this lack of motivation you're experiencing? Nothing. You do nothing with it. You let it be. You stop trying to fix yourself, to improve yourself, to motivate yourself. You allow this phase to unfold in its own time. Because what's really happening is that you're being reorganized at a fundamental level. The old software is being uninstalled, so to speak, and new software is being written. But this process can't be rushed. It has its own timing, its own rhythm. In the meantime, be gentle with yourself. Don't compare yourself to who you were before, or to who you think you should be. Don't try to force yourself back into old patterns that no longer fit. Instead, be curious. Observe what's happening without judgment. Notice what naturally attracts your attention, what makes you feel alive, what makes you laugh or wonder or feel deeply. You might find that your interests have completely changed. Things that once seemed tremendously important might now seem trivial, and things you never paid attention to before might suddenly captivate you. This is natural. You're not the same person you were before awakening. You can't expect to want the same things or be motivated by the same goals. There's a wonderful story from the Zen tradition about a master who, after his enlightenment, was asked what he did. He said, "When I'm hungry, I eat. When I'm tired, I sleep." His questioner was puzzled. "But doesn't everyone do that?" The master replied, "No. When most people eat, they're thinking about 1,000 other things. When they sleep, they're worrying about tomorrow. But when I eat, I just eat. When I sleep, I just sleep. This is the quality of life that emerges after the false motivation falls away. Not a life of high achievement or constant productivity, necessarily, but a life of presence, of wholeness, of being fully here for whatever is happening right now. And paradoxically, this often leads to a kind of productivity that far exceeds what forced motivation ever achieved, because it's not scattered and conflicted. It's unified, focused, natural, but whether it leads to great productivity or not is beside the point. The point is that you're no longer living from a place of lack and fear. You're living from a place of sufficiency and peace. And from that place, whatever unfolds is exactly what needs to unfold. So don't worry about your lack of motivation. Don't try to whip yourself back into shape. Don't feel guilty for not having goals and ambitions. Instead, rest in the recognition that brought you to this point in the first place. The recognition that you are already whole, already complete, already home. Everything else will take care of itself. The universe has been managing quite well for billions of years without your anxious interference. It will continue to manage, and you are not separate from that management. You are how the universe is managing things right here, right now, in this particular location. Trust that. Trust yourself. Trust life. And in that trust, you might just discover
there's a strange cruelty in the way we've been taught to think about rest. Somewhere along the line, we absorb this idea that stopping even for a moment, even when we're utterly depleted, is a kind of moral failure, a weakness, a surrender to laziness or lack of discipline or insufficient character. And so we push through. We keep going when our odis are screaming at us to stop. We force ourselves forward when every fiber of our being is asking for pause. And we tell ourselves that this is strength, this is determination, this is what it means to be a good person, a valuable person, a person worth something in this world. But here's what nobody tells you. The exhaustion you're feeling, the bone-deep tiredness that sleep doesn't fix, that weekends don't touch, that vacations barely dent, it's not just physical fatigue. It's not something that rest can fix because you've been convinced that rest itself is the problem. You've internalized this voice, haven't you? The one that says if you rest, you're giving up. If you stop, you're failing. If you allow yourself to do nothing, you're wasting your life, squandering your potential, letting everyone down. And so rest becomes impossible. Because every time you try to rest, every time you even think about resting, that voice starts up. You sit down for 5 minutes, and immediately you're thinking about all the things you should be doing. You try to relax, and your mind fills with guilt, with anxiety, with this nagging sense that you're doing something wrong. You finally give yourself permission to take a break, and you spend the entire break feeling terrible about taking it. The rest doesn't restore you because you can't actually rest. You can only perform rest while simultaneously punishing yourself for needing it. Look at how you talk to yourself when you're tired. Really, listen to the commentary running in your head. It's harsh, isn't it? Brutal even. You'd never speak to another person the way you speak to yourself when you're exhausted. If a friend came to you and said they were tired, truly tired, worn down to nothing, you'd have compassion for them. You'd tell them to rest, to take care of themselves, to stop pushing so hard. But when it's you, when it's your exhaustion, your depletion, your desperate need for pause, you have no mercy. You tell yourself to toughen up, to push through, to stop being so weak. And the terrible thing is that this cruelty, this refusal to allow yourself rest, it doesn't actually make you more productive. It doesn't make you stronger or more capable or more successful. It just makes you more exhausted. You're running on fumes, operating at a fraction of your capacity, dragging yourself through days in a fog of fatigue. But you won't stop because stopping feels like failure. So you keep going, getting less done, doing lower quality work, making more mistakes, feeling more overwhelmed, and all the while telling yourself that if you just try harder, if you just push more, if you just refuse to give up, eventually you'll break through to the other side. But there is no other side. Not this way. Because what you're doing isn't sustainable. You can't will yourself through genuine depletion. You can't discipline your way out of exhaustion. You can't bootstrap your way to restoration. The body doesn't work that way. The mind doesn't work that way. Human beings are not machines that can run indefinitely on determination alone. We have limits, real, physical, psychological limits. And when we reach those limits, we need to rest, not as a reward for working hard enough, not as something we've earned through sufficient suffering, but as a basic requirement of being alive. Yet somehow we've created a culture where rest is seen as optional, a luxury, something for the weak or the privileged or the lazy. Everyone else is hustling, grinding, pushing through their exhaustion, so you should too. Everyone else seems to be managing, seems to be keeping up. So your inability to do the same must be a personal failing. You look around and see people who appear to have infinite energy, who are always doing, always achieving, always moving forward. And you wonder what's wrong with you that you can't do the same. But here's what you're not seeing. You're not seeing the crashes that happen behind closed doors. You're not seeing the medication people take to keep functioning. You're not seeing the relationships that suffer, the health problems that develop, the mental breakdowns that eventually come. You're seeing the performance, the carefully curated image of tireless productivity. You're not seeing the cost, and so you judge yourself against an impossible standard of fiction and find yourself lacking.
Before we continue, many of you have been asking for something longer, something with actual practices you can use in daily life. So check out the 3-hour audiobook that takes everything we explore in these videos and gives you the tools to actually work with it. Because here's the thing, intellectual understanding without practical application just keeps you spinning in your head. You need both, the insight and the practice, the philosophy and the daily work that makes it real. This audiobook gives you that. 3 hours of deep wisdom with practices built in, so you're not just thinking differently, you're living differently. If you're serious about changing how you experience your life, the link is in the description below. Now, let's continue.
The truth is that most people are just as exhausted as you are. They're just better at hiding it, or they haven't hit their wall yet, or they're paying a price you can't see. The ones who seem to have endless energy either have circumstances you're not aware of, or they're headed for a reckoning they don't see coming. Nobody can sustain the pace we're expected to keep. Nobody can be constantly productive, constantly available, constantly on, without eventually breaking down. It's not possible. And yet we keep trying because we've been taught that the alternative, which is rest, which is stopping, which is saying, no, I can't do this right now, that's giving up. But what if it's not? What if rest isn't giving up? What if stopping when you've reached your limit isn't weakness but wisdom? What if the real failure is not in pausing when you need to, but in refusing to pause until you collapse? Because that's what happens, you know. When you won't listen to the whispers of your exhaustion, when you ignore the gentle signals that you need to slow down, eventually your body makes the decision for you. You get sick. You burn out completely. You have a breakdown. The rest happens anyway, but now it's not rest, it's emergency shutdown. And it takes so much longer to recover from that. Think about how we treat rest in every other context. When you're sick, genuinely ill, nobody questions that you need to rest to heal. When you're injured, everyone understands that rest is part of recovery. But emotional exhaustion, mental fatigue, the soul-deep tiredness that comes from pushing too hard for too long, somehow that doesn't count. Somehow that's not legitimate. You can't call in sick for being tired. You can't take time off for depletion. You're expected to just push through, to manage, to cope, and maybe you've been doing that. Maybe you've been managing and coping and pushing through for so long that you've forgotten what it feels like to not be exhausted. Maybe tiredness has become your baseline, your normal state. and you barely remember what it was like to wake up feeling rested, to move through your day with energy, to have something left at the end of the day for yourself. Maybe you've been running on empty for so long that empty feels normal, and the idea of actually filling back up seems impossible, unrealistic, like something that happens to other people but not to you. But here's what you need to understand. You are allowed to rest, not because you've earned it, not because you've worked hard enough or suffered enough or pushed yourself to the absolute brink, but simply because you're a human being, and human beings need rest. It's not a luxury. It's not optional. It's as fundamental as food, as water, as air. You cannot function without it. And the fact that you're so exhausted right now, the fact that you're barely holding on, that's not a sign of your weakness. It's a sign that you've been denying yourself something essential for far too long. So let's talk about what rest actually is, because I think we've gotten confused about this. Rest is not just the absence of work. It's not just stopping one activity to start another. It's not scrolling through your phone or watching television or any of the dozen ways we try to distract ourselves from our exhaustion without actually addressing it. Real rest is deeper than that. It's a fundamental letting go, a release of the constant effort that you've been making just to keep yourself upright. Real rest means stopping completely. Not stopping while still thinking about all the things you should be doing. Not stopping while feeling guilty about stopping. Not stopping while planning your return to activity. But actually stopping, letting yourself be still, allowing your whole system to finally drop the burden it's been carrying. And for most of us, this is terrifying. Because when we really stop, when we really let ourselves rest, we have to feel everything we've been running from. The exhaustion, yes, but also the sadness, the disappointment, the grief, the anger, all the emotions we've been too busy to feel. This is why so many people resist rest even when they desperately need it, because rest requires surrender. It requires admitting that you can't keep going, that you've reached your limit, that you need help, that you're not superhuman. And we've been taught that surrender is weakness, that admitting limitation is failure, that needing help is shameful. So we'd rather destroy ourselves than rest, rather burn out completely than admit we're tired. But surrender is not weakness. Surrender is intelligence. It's your system's wisdom recognizing that what you're doing isn't working, that you can't continue on this path, that something has to change. When you surrender to rest, when you finally stop fighting your exhaustion, you're not giving up on your life. You're actually giving your life a chance to recover, to restore, to find its natural rhythm again. You see, the exhaustion you're feeling, it's not the enemy, it's a messenger. It's your deeper intelligence trying to get your attention, trying to tell you that something is wrong, that the way you're living isn't sustainable, that you need to change course. But instead of listening to the message, we shoot the messenger. We fight the exhaustion with caffeine, with willpower, with discipline, trying to override what our body is telling us. And the exhaustion gets louder, more insistent, until finally it's screaming at us and we have no choice but to listen. What would happen if you listened sooner? What would happen if when you first noticed the tiredness, the depletion, the sense of running on empty, you actually paused? Not forever, not giving up on your responsibilities or abandoning your life, but just pausing long enough to let yourself recover, to let your system restore itself, to remember what it feels like to have energy, to have capacity, to have something to give. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking you can't. You have too many responsibilities, too many people depending on you, too much that has to get done. If you stop, everything will fall apart. The world will end. You'll lose everything you've worked for. And maybe there's some truth to that. Maybe there are real consequences to resting. But what are the consequences of not resting? What happens if you keep going until you break completely? Because that's the trajectory you're on. And when you break, when you burn out entirely, when your body shuts down or your mind gives out, the consequences of that will be far worse than the consequences of choosing to rest now. Besides, most of what we think will happen if we rest, it doesn't actually happen. The world doesn't end. People cope. Things that seemed urgent turn out to be less critical than we thought. And the things that truly matter, the things that genuinely can't wait, somehow they get handled even when we're resting. Because rest doesn't mean abandoning all responsibility. It means being selective about what you give your energy to, being realistic about what you can actually do, being honest about your limits. And here's something interesting. When you actually rest, when you give yourself real time to recover, you come back more capable than you were before. You have clarity that you didn't have when you were exhausted. You have energy that you couldn't access when you were depleted. You make better decisions. You do better work. You show up more fully for the things and people that matter. Rest doesn't make you less productive. It makes you actually productive instead of just busy. But the deepest thing about rest, the thing that makes it so transformative, is what it teaches you about yourself. When you finally allow yourself to rest without guilt, without feeling like you're giving up, you discover something profound. You discover that your worth is not tied to your productivity, that you are valuable even when you're not doing anything, that your existence doesn't need to be justified by constant achievement, that you are enough just as you are, even when you're too tired to do another single thing. This is revolutionary, you see, because the voice that tells you rest is giving up, that voice is operating on a very specific assumption. The assumption is that you're only worth something if you're producing something, if you're achieving something, if you're constantly proving your value through effort and output. But this is exhausting, obviously, because it means you can never rest, never stop, never just be. You always have to be earning your right to exist through what you do. But what if you didn't have to earn that right? What if you were valuable simply because you exist? What if your worth was inherent, not earned? Then rest wouldn't be giving up. It would just be a natural part of being alive. You wouldn't have to feel guilty about it any more than you feel guilty about breathing or sleeping or eating. It would just be something you do because you're human and humans need rest. And when you really get this, when you really understand that your value isn't dependent on your productivity, everything changes. You can rest without guilt. You can stop without feeling like a failure. You can take care of yourself without having to justify it. You can listen to your body's wisdom instead of overriding it with willpower. You can live in a way that's actually sustainable instead of constantly pushing yourself to the edge of collapse. This doesn't mean you never work, never try, never push yourself. It means you do those things from a place of fullness rather than depletion. You work because you have energy to work, not because you're forcing yourself through exhaustion. You try because you're genuinely interested and engaged, not because you're trying to prove your worth. You push yourself because you're excited about growth, not because you're terrified of being seen as lazy. And here's the beautiful paradox. When you give yourself permission to rest, when you stop treating rest as giving up and start treating it as necessary, you actually need less rest because you're not getting to the point of complete depletion anymore. You're listening to the early signals, taking breaks before they become emergency shutdowns, maintaining yourself instead of running yourself into the ground and then trying to recover. So if you're exhausted right now, if you're barely holding on, if every part of you is asking for rest, but you're afraid that resting means giving up, I want you to hear this. Rest is not giving up. Rest is how you keep going. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. It's not failure, it's fundamental. You're not lazy for needing it. You're human for needing it. And you deserve it, not because you've earned it, but because you exist, because you're here, because you're tired. And that's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything. So rest, really rest. Not the guilty half rest where you're physically still but mentally racing. Not the performative rest where you're trying to prove to others or yourself that you can relax. But real, deep, surrendered rest Let yourself stop. Let yourself be tired. Let yourself need what you need without apologizing for it. And trust that this isn't the end. It's not giving up. It's not quitting. It's how you begin again, restored, renewed, ready, not because you've forced yourself through, but because you finally allowed yourself to stop. There are times in life when you feel as though you have wandered off the map. You look around and nothing seems familiar. The signposts that once guided you are gone. The landmarks that once gave you confidence have vanished, and suddenly you are overcome with a strange disorientation. You may call it confusion, uncertainty, or despair, but beneath all those names is a single experience. You feel lost. To be lost is not simply to lack direction. It is to have once believed you knew where you were going, only to realize that the path has dissolved beneath your feet. And in that moment, everything you trusted begins to tremble. The career you thought would define you feels empty. The relationship you believed would complete you unravels. The ideals you clung to no longer hold weight. You stand in the middle of life's forest and see only trees, stretching endlessly with no clear way forward. At first, this can feel like failure. After all, we are taught from childhood that life is a journey with a clear destination, and that our task is to find the straightest route to that destination. Parents, teachers, leaders, and advertisements all hand us maps. They tell us, study hard, get the right job, marry the right person, accumulate wealth, and you will arrive safely at happiness. But sooner or later, many of us discover that these maps are faulty. They do not match the terrain. We follow them diligently, only to find ourselves in places we never wanted to be. And when the map fails us, we feel lost. Yet perhaps this sense of being lost is not the catastrophe it appears to be. Perhaps it is, in fact, a gift. For the truth is, the map was never the territory. It was only a picture, a sketch, a simplified story. The territory itself is always more vast, more wild, more unpredictable than any map can show. And when the map is torn away, frightening though it may be, we are at last forced to look at the territory with our own eyes. We discover reality directly, without the filter of borrowed instructions. Consider how a traveler might cling desperately to a guidebook, reading every detail and trying to match it to the streets of a city. But one day, the book is lost, and the traveler is forced to wander. At first, there is panic, but then, slowly, the city comes alive. Sights and sounds emerge that the book never mentioned. Hidden alleyways, unexpected encounters, uncharted beauty. What once seemed like disorientation becomes discovery. Being lost is the doorway to truly seeing, and so it may be with your own life. The disorientation you feel is not proof that you have failed, but proof that you are finally meeting reality as it is. You are no longer shielded by the maps of others, no longer protected by the certainty of borrowed truths. You are naked before the mystery, and though it is terrifying, it is also alive. To be lost is to be free of false guidance, free to wander, free to see freshly. Yet notice how hard it is to accept this. The mind clings to certainty like a child clings to a blanket. We would rather have a false map than no map at all. We would rather pretend we know than admit we do not. And so the moment of lostness feels unbearable. But look closer. The discomfort arises not from being lost itself, but from resisting it. The trees are only frightening because you demand a clear path. The silence is only heavy because you insist on constant noise. If you let yourself rest in the lostness, something begins to shift. Have you ever noticed how silence deepens when you stop straining to fill it? At first it is uncomfortable, but then it becomes rich, almost musical. In the same way, lostness becomes meaningful when you stop insisting on certainty. It becomes a vast openness, a space in which anything is possible. What felt like a dead end reveals itself as the edge of a larger horizon. You are not trapped, you are unmoored, and that is a very different thing. Think of a river. We often imagine it as having a single destination, flowing inevitably toward the sea, but along the way it meanders, branches, doubles back, floods and dries. If you stand on its banks at any given moment, you might say, this river is lost. It is wandering aimlessly. But from the larger view, it is simply the river being itself, finding its way through the land as it must. To be lost is only to be seen from too narrow a perspective. From the broader perspective, nothing is lost at all. So when you feel lost, what is really happening? You are awakening to the fact that life is not a straight road with a fixed destination. You are realizing that all the maps were temporary, that they could never contain the mystery of existence. And while this realization unsettles the mind, it liberates the heart, for then you no longer have to pretend. You no longer have to force yourself into paths that do not fit. You can allow yourself to wander, to question, to begin again. Lostness, then, is not the enemy of life. It is life breaking through the illusions you once clung to. It is reality reminding you that the point was never to arrive, but to move, to explore, to live. To be lost is to stand at the threshold of discovery, trembling perhaps, but also alive with possibility. And notice how, in those moments of disorientation, the smallest details become radiant. When the big picture collapses, the present moment comes to the foreground. You feel the air on your skin. You hear the rustle of leaves. You notice the rise and fall of your breath. The mind, stripped of its maps, returns to immediacy. And in that immediacy, you find a strange peace. For the present moment has no need for maps. It is complete in itself. In truth, you cannot be lost in the present. Lostness always refers to the future or the past. You say, I do not know where I am going, or I should not be where I am. But here, now, you are simply here. The ground supports you. The breath moves in and out. Life continues. To drop into the present is to see that lostness is only a thought, not a reality. And when that thought softens, what remains is not despair but wonder. So perhaps, rather than resisting lostness, you might welcome it. You might see it as an initiation, a necessary stage in awakening. For who has ever truly found themselves without first being lost? Who has ever discovered truth without first seeing the failure of illusion? The very word discover means to uncover, to remove what once covered over reality. Lostness removes the cover, and though the exposure is raw, it is also true. In the end, the feeling of being lost may be the most honest feeling of all, for it admits what is always the case, that we do not ultimately know where life is taking us. The certainty we cling to is a fragile construction. Lostness tears it away and reveals the vastness beyond. And in that vastness, you may find not the path you expected, but the path you needed. When the path disappears beneath your feet, when the signs no longer point the way, and when the horizon stretches endlessly in every direction, something remarkable begins to happen. You start to discover that being lost is not an obstacle to life, but part of its essence. For what does it mean to be found, if not to have first been lost? And what does it mean to have direction, if not to have wandered without one? To feel lost is to be placed at the heart of mystery, where life can no longer be reduced to neat explanations. The truth is, you were never truly in control of the journey. You imagined that you were choosing each step, plotting each destination, and charting each course. But look closely. Did you decide to be born? Did you choose your first breath, your first thought, your first desire? Life has been carrying you all along, flowing like a river that bends and turns without asking permission. To feel lost is simply to realize this, that the river does not always follow your map, but it always flows, always moves, always carries. And so, the moment of lostness is also the moment of truth. It is the place where the illusion of control begins to crack, where you see that you are not the little navigator steering through a dangerous sea, but the very sea itself, with all its waves and currents. The loss of certainty is the birth of freedom, for now you no longer need to force life to conform to your plans. You can begin to move with it, to surrender to its rhythm, to trust that it knows more than you ever could. This is what the ancient sages called wu wei, effortless action, flowing with the grain of things instead of against it. Imagine a dancer moving to music. The dancer does not plan each step in advance, nor does she fight the rhythm. She listens, responds, allows the body to be moved by the sound. In the same way, life invites you to dance with it. Lostness is the silence before the music begins, the pause that invites you to listen more deeply. And when you do, you may find yourself moving with a grace you did not know was possible. Think of how a bird flies. It does not calculate each gust of wind, each eddy of air. It spreads its wings and trusts the sky to hold it. Or think of how a wave rises on the ocean. It does not know where it will crest, nor when it will fall, yet it belongs perfectly to the movement of the whole. To feel lost is to realize that you, too, are like the bird and the wave carried by something larger, included in a pattern beyond comprehension. You do not need to know the way, because the way is already unfolding through you. And here is the paradox. It is often when you stop searching desperately for direction that direction appears. Have you noticed how solutions come most easily when you stop trying to force them? How clarity arises not in the frenzy of thought, but in the quiet of letting go. To be lost is to be emptied of old certainties, and in that emptiness, new possibilities emerge. The openness of lostness is the very ground in which discovery grows. But what is it that we discover in lostness? First, we discover that the self we thought we were, the one who must always know, always plan, always control, is not as solid as it seemed. You believed you were the driver behind the eyes, the thinker of thoughts, the chooser of actions, but in lostness, that image crumbles. You see that thoughts arise on their own, feelings come and go, choices present themselves like waves breaking on the shore. The you who was supposed to be in charge is nowhere to be found, and though this may seem frightening, it is also liberating. For if the little self is not in control, then the burden is lifted. Life can flow as it will, and you can rest. Second, we discover that lostness is not separation, but intimacy. When the map is gone, you are no longer looking at life from above, as though it were an object to be controlled. You are inside it, immersed, woven into every detail. The rustle of leaves, the sound of rain, the rhythm of breath, all of it surrounds you, includes you, moves with you. Lostness dissolves the distance between you and the world. You realize you were never a separate traveler moving through a foreign land. You are the land itself, the path itself, the very movement of the journey. And third, we discover that lostness is not permanent. It is a season, like winter, cold, perhaps harsh, but also necessary. For in winter the ground rests, the trees shed their leaves, and what seems like death is preparation for spring. To be lost is to enter a season of dormancy, of waiting, of gestation. It is not the end, but the pause before renewal. And when spring comes, when new paths open, you may see that the lostness was not wasted. It was the soil from which new life grew. So rather than resisting lostness, we might honor it. We might see it as part of the great rhythm of existence, the ebb and flow of knowing and not knowing, of clarity and confusion, of direction and wandering. Just as day and night belong together, just as tide and trough are inseparable, so too do foundness and lostness belong to one another. Without lostness, foundness would have no meaning. Without confusion, clarity would not shine. This is why many traditions speak of the dark night of the soul, a period of disorientation and emptiness that precedes awakening. It is not punishment, but preparation. It is the breaking open of the old so that the new can enter. And so when you feel lost, you may trust that something is ripening beneath the surface, something that will emerge in its own time. You do not need to force it any more than you can force a seed to sprout before it is ready. You need only wait, trust, and allow. And in that waiting, you may find a peace you did not expect. For when you no longer demand that life provide answers, you are free to rest in the questions themselves. To live without knowing is not a failure. It is a kind of faith, a willingness to let life unfold without clinging. And in that faith, you may find that you are never truly lost at all. You are always here, always part of the unfolding, always held in the great embrace of existence. Look around you now. Notice the space in which these words appear. Notice the sensations in your body, the rhythm of your breath, the subtle sounds in the room. In this immediacy, there is no lostness. There is only presence. The feeling of being lost arises only when the mind insists on a map, on a certainty about the future. But here, now, there is nothing missing. The ground holds you. The breath moves. Awareness shines. In this presence, the idea of being lost dissolves, and what remains is wholeness. And so, when you feel lost, remember this: it is not a mistake. It is not proof that you are broken or that you have failed. It is life guiding you away from false maps, away from borrowed truths, toward the discovery of something deeper. Lostness is not the absence of path, but the opening to a greater path, one that cannot be charted in advance, but only walked moment by moment. You are not lost. You are the universe playing at being lost, so that it may discover itself anew. You are the wave that rises, not knowing where it will fall, the bird that soars without a fixed destination, the traveler who finds beauty only when the guidebook is forgotten. You are the dance itself, and the music, and the silence between the notes. And when you see this, when you feel it, not just as an idea, but as a lived reality, then lostness becomes something altogether different. It becomes freedom, intimacy, and trust. You no longer cling to certainty, for you see that certainty was never real. You no longer fear confusion, for you see that confusion is part of the dance. You no longer resist lostness, for you see that lostness is the doorway to being found. So let yourself be lost. Let yourself wonder, question, doubt, and stumble. For in that very wandering, life is carrying you. In that very doubt, truth is ripening. In that very stumbling, the path is appearing. And in the end, you may discover that you were never lost at all, but always exactly where you needed to be